All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the, what's today, July 12th, 2016 Milton Conservation Commission meeting. And as a matter of public record, we have a tape recorder running, and we'd ask anybody that speaks to identify themselves so that we'll have a record of your presentation. The Milton Conservation Commission is appointed by the Board of Selectmen to implement the rules and regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act under the state law and the Milton Town bylaw governing wetlands. As a matter of formality, we introduce ourselves.
Judith Darrell Kemp.
My name is John Kiernan.
Michael Blute.
Arthur Doyle.
Ingrid Beatty.
Now, as a logistical matter, I'd like to change the order of the agenda. And the reason is number 5 on the agenda is Notice of Intent 175 Governor Stoughton Lane. That's a matter in which I have recused myself from the hearing, and so I will have to absent myself from that. And the reason we were waiting was to make sure that Ingrid arrived so that we'd have a quorum when we get to number 5. But because I have to leave at that time, the additional business, which is number 6, I'm going to move to the front of the agenda. And that's something that you may not know about, but you should know about. And that is that on July 2nd, the Conservation Commission had a public meeting, and we did a series of site inspections. And one of the site inspections on July 2nd was at 118 Forbes Road. And while we were there, we observed what's now referred to as a dead zone. It's an area, and I'm going to guess an acre, something in that nature, of dead everything. Trees, bushes, grass, leaves, vines, invasives.
Everything.
Everything's dead. And we were quite concerned.
And it's on the Neponset.
It is right on the Neponset River.
Yep.
So what we did is we couldn't issue an enforcement order at the time because we didn't know who did what and why. So what we did do was we retained Steve Ivers, who's a well-known botanist, and the town has retained his services in the past. And he went out and conducted an inspection, and he submitted a report to us. And it's quite a disturbing report, indicating that some kind of chemical has been used to kill anything and everything. The land actually belongs to Bernie Lynch. I called Bernie immediately. He knew nothing about it, and for members of the public, I can attest to the fact that he has not been down to that area of his land in several years. And he was quite disturbed to find this out, gave us absolute permission to go on the land to have it inspected, which we did. He is 100% supportive of our efforts, and he is an environmentalist himself, and was quite disturbed to hear about the destruction of some of his land that abuts the Neponset. So what I'd like to do is have a discussion. This is under additional business. We have all had the benefit of reading the report,
Yes.
I think. It's a disturbing report. There is a next step, and to the extent that it's on Bernie's land, I don't think we have any problem whatsoever, given his 100%, 110% support, to have this chemically tested to see if we can identify what kind of a chemical was used to destroy the forest. This is beautiful land, and this is watershed land. It's right. The riverway is the river's right there. And this is approximately an acre, I'm guessing on that, but it's a very large expanse of woodlands and wetlands that have been destroyed. So I think, my proposal is that we retain the services of the chemist that was recommended to us by Stephen Ivers. And in terms of the payment, the Conservation Commission does have a revolving fund, and each year we are entitled, pursuant to the town meeting vote, to expend up to $15,000 for environmental purposes. And pursuant to that authorization, we retain Stephen Ivers, and for the public record, we have a bill here for $625, which I'd be thrilled to pay. I think it's well worth the effort. And I think that we should move forward with his suggestion, retain a chemist to get in there, test the soils, test the trees, test the foliage, and find out what chemical was used. And then what I'd like to do is also suggest that we bring in or request the attendance of the neighbors and those that are in the vicinity of this dead zone, and ask them to come in to see what they know and see if we can find out who did what and why.
John, I'd like to suggest 2 other things, if I may. Number 3, under the conclusions from the report, a determination, in addition to identifying the agent that was used, or the herbicide that was used, whether or not it is still residual in the soil,
Sure.
and for how long. Chemical analysis should be able to determine that. And it would seem logical, since it abuts the river, to notify DCR because of the leaching properties of any chemical and its impact upon water life.
Absolutely. Great suggestions.
I mean, it could be that there was a report of fish kill that we didn't hear about at some time. That could also narrow down what might have happened.
Right, from leaching, yeah, no question.
That's true. Well, before we have a motion formally proposed to move forward, are there any members of the public, abutters, members of the public, citizens, folks that want to ask questions? And we don't have all the answers, but we did see what we saw, and it's quite disturbing. But we're ready here, ready, willing, and able to answer any questions.
What part of the vegetation died?
Everything. Trees.
Down to the water line?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. From the lawn to the water line.
It's like something that you would see with napalm. I mean, it's completely
200
gray,
feet?
dead.
Down the driveway?
As you
The hill.
walk down the path, everything to the left as you walk
Actually,
down.
could you identify yourself
sorry.
for the?
Pardon?
Could you identify yourself for the?
Craig McNaught.
Thank you. Someone else had a.
Mary Ann Alvarino, Quizzen Brook
Oh,
Road.
he wants
Mike.
you
Oh,
to come
can you
up.
come
and-
forward so you can use the microphone?
Okay. I wish you would speak up a little more too. I'm a little hard of hearing. I can't.
I shall endeavor to do so. Thank you.
This is just a quick question, but isn't this a criminal matter? Is anybody going to, tell the police or state officials or?
You know what I'm saying?
We're going step by step, and we actually, when we first saw it, we said, oh, we've got to, the sky is falling, we have to do something immediately. So we said, let's take the first step first, to get a professional botanist to come in and tell us what has happened. And the next step is to do the chemical analysis. And the third step would be to find out who's responsible for this. And I agree, there are all kinds of statutes, particularly in light of the fact that the land belongs to Mr. Lynch, and he's got nothing to do with it from what we can determine. He hasn't even seen it. He's not in a position to be able to get to that particular portion of his property right now.
And when we saw it, we went through the logical, could it be gypsy moths? Are we looking at tent caterpillars? That's what denudes trees. But it was more than the trees. It was the shrubs, ground cover, everything. And Mr. Ivers says in point 7, discussion point, he says, in over 30 years of professional work in the woodlands and wetlands, I have never seen a natural condition similar to the dead zone. So we know something's going on, and we're trying to do the research.
And there are certainly statutes that would implicate both civil liability and criminal liability. I mean, one would be trespass, because Mr. Lynch certainly gave no permission for this. He has no knowledge of it. There are civil statutes that if you destroy trees on another's property, there are sanctions imposed by the court that can be imposed by the court. So we will leave no stone unturned for this one.
But aren't there?
Mr. McNaught, could you come forward so
So
everyone
you
can
use the microphone.
benefit from your esteemed
Wisdom.
comments?
Wisdom.
Wow.
Kind of thick.
But aren't there federal statutes also, not just state
Oh,
statutes?
the Army Corps actually has control of that area, because I know when Sandy Will put in the wharf,
Right.
he had to have coastal zone management,
Yeah.
Chapter 91 license, but he also had to have approval of the Army Corps of Engineers.
Right.
So yes, indeed, that's a navigable river, and the Army Corps will be involved as well.
Did you people observe any dead fish?
No, I did not.
Well, it's an herbicide, so there may be, ramifications with mammals or fish or other wildlife, but it's an herbicide, so at this point, we don't know. I think the first thing, again, one step at a time. It's an herbicide, let's figure out what kind of herbicide it was.
We're not there yet.
I think it starts with R, ends in P.
Riddle? What's a riddle? I'm not good at riddles. You have to.
Roundup?
Oh, Roundup.
Oh, it could be.
Well, that's glyphosate, and, you know, again, lots of people use those in their yards. We don't know. I mean, I think we just need to figure out what it is.
Right. And Steve Ivas actually in his report gave us some suggestions as to what he says typical herbicides to test for include 2,4-D, 2,4,5-T, glyphosate,
That's Roundup.
triclopyr, I can't pronounce it, and imzapyr. So he's actually listed the usual suspects,
Yep.
so to speak. But it's really up to the chemist, and we intend to hire a chemist to get to the bottom of it.
And it is potentially a criminal.
Before we speculate on anything, I think.
Yeah, it is potentially a criminal issue. We just haven't gotten that far yet to be able to say that definitively.
I hope Mr. Lynch is exempt. Exempt from what someone did to his property.
We have to see how,
Right.
we have to see how it plays out.
I think
Yeah.
we've known
I'm
Bernie
not a
for
lawyer.
50, but I mean, his integrity is beyond reproach, and he was shocked when I told him.
I just hope he's not held
Right.
liable for what someone else did.
I think someone else had a comment. Did someone else have a comment about this?
All right, thank you. So then, we get back to a motion, and Arthur, do you want to formulate, because you added, first to hire number one, we have to authorize the payment of Mr. Ivers for doing what we requested that he do. We have an invoice here in the amount of $625. And secondly, we would have to authorize a further expenditure to hire a chemist. And not knowing an appropriate chemist, I'm perfectly willing to follow his advice and hire the chemist
I agree.
that he suggested.
Well, why don't we do the first two motions? The first motion being to authorize payment
Yes.
and to engage the chemist, to put aside funds to engage a chemist, authorize the engagement of the chemist recommended by Mr. Ivers.
Correct.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's done.
And if I can just interject, I think time is of the essence because some of these
Yes.
things degrade quicker than others.
Yes.
So in terms of getting a chemist on board and taking a soil sample and plant samples and even down into the water, I think sooner rather than later. And is there, what can we do in terms of timing?
Well,
Part
I
of-
think we can get started. Kathy can do this tomorrow. And just to give you sort of the history, we made this first observation.
Was that July,
On July
2nd site walk that I
And
was
we have
up
the
there? Yeah.
inspection completed and the report received by July 10th. So
That's
we're
fast.
talking 8 days to receipt of report. So I think we're on the right track. If we can retain the services of the suggested chemist, there'll be no reason to delay
Yeah.
at all. And we get out there, and Bernie's given permission to come on the land.
But in terms of quantities of soil testing, I'm assuming it's a spectrum. It's not just one point. It's his discretion in terms of quantity and
I would think
locations.
so.
And I will send him Steve's report.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. But ask him for a budget. We don't want to authorize a blank check. We do need a budget. But we could move pretty quickly on that.
So as a second motion, we would have the identification of the herbicide that was involved, the determination of its residual nature within the soil or soils, and a notification of DCR
Correct.
accompanied by a report, Mr. Ivers' report.
Correct.
Anything else to add?
Well, we may want to alert the Army Corps as well.
Or would we do that, or would DCR do that?
What's that?
Would we do that, or would DCR do that?
Should we get in touch with?
Why not? Why would we do it?
I don't know, I'm just asking the question.
Oh, for sure. Right. When you said DCR, and I know that their land is near there, and they have an interest in the river, and this is an ACEC, by the way. Can you believe it? People, somebody using this kind of a chemical in an ACEC? And that for, I don't mean to talk in code, an ACEC is an area of critical environmental concern that has all kinds of monitoring and overview components that it's not just DEP, but everybody gets involved in ACEC protection. This is a pretty sensitive area. So we've got DEP, DCR,
EPA,
the EPA,
EPA,
Yeah.
right?
and the Army Corps.
Right. And-
Yeah, I don't think we should just wait for somebody else to.
Right.
inform. I
That's
think we
fine.
ought to inform all of
Yeah.
us.
And if
I was
someone
just
else,
asking the question
Yeah.
so I
No,
could
I
understand.
think it's a good idea. So the same letter to all 4 of those agencies?
including that plan.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Should we send the report as well?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but-
everything.
Yeah, I included that in the motion.
Good.
All right, thank you. And then, I guess the next step would be to invite folks in to, and we don't have any subpoena power, but we could invite them in if they would like to comment on what they know or don't know.
I think with the magnitude of what we're engaged in, we should notify the Board of Selectmen as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we could send copies of each letter, the DCR letter, the DEP letter, the EPA, the Army Corps, we could CC it to the Board of Selectmen as well. And maybe we can wait until we get a report back from the chemist. But when is our next meeting?
I wouldn't be inclined to wait. Why, I would say we would just give them what we know and say that we're going ahead, and by the way, we have the chemist evaluating the conditions.
All right.
At least to flag it, and then they're aware of it. And if they want to be more proactive than we are, then more power to them. But if they want to wait till the report comes back from the chemist, then that's their call. Let's not make that call for them.
Agreed.
I'm sorry, if who wants to come in?
Everybody. I mean, if anybody there, we don't want to wait to notify them that this is an issue and that this is how we're proceeding. Any of the
Oh,
groups.
no, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. I had kind of clicked onto the
Oh,
next,
sure. Yep.
the next component of our response plan, and that is that we should be looking at the neighbors, and asking the neighbors to come into our meeting to see if they know anything. Because I happen to have in my hand the map of the area.
Do we
It's
want a
an-
process
it's
of
an-
notifying the abutters?
Yes, I think we should notify the abutters.
And one actually is trustees of reservation, because they are Governor Hutchinson's field. You know, right here, trustees of reservation,
Wow,
yeah. As well.
somebody bit off more than they might want to chew on. I didn't realize 0 Adams Street, trustees of the public reservation.
Right.
That's an abutter to this property. Ouch. Well, I think all the abutters should be notified and invited to attend our next meeting. Boy, it's a lot of destruction.
Yeah, it's just totally wiped out.
And we
Right.
just happened to be there.
Right.
A radius of 100 feet, you think, or 200 feet, or for butters?
Well, some of them are large pieces of property, but
All of them on that plan?
Bernie Lynch's property actually, touches an awful lot of people. And we have, Sandy Will next door, Mr. Grogan. I mean, there are people here that I
But why
can
don't we
see.
say the direct abutters to notify directly? Yes, that actually about, that way we can limit John, so we're not just going far afield.
All right, but that would be the trustees of the public reservation. Mr. Lynch, I've got Patricia Dunn at 76 Forbes. I've got Joseph Grogan at 90 Forbes. I've got Sandy Will at 106 Forbes. And if they're inclined to attend and assist in the investigation, then we'd be very grateful.
John, could I take a quick look? Michael, this. Yep. Yep.
Can we get a copy of that?
What's that?
Can we get a copy?
Yeah, I haven't seen
Can
it.
someone email? It was
Yes.
not in my packet. Can we
Kathy,
get a
can you
copy?
email it to
Can we
everybody?
get a copy of that?
Right, I mean, that's very helpful. And we could do, I just listed the abutters, we could actually do people within
Maybe.
100 feet. What is the abutter regulation, Kathy, do you know?
100 feet.
It's 100 feet from the property line. So there may be some, there would be some additional people. So I tell you what,
I move to include not only just abutters, but those within properties of 100 feet as well.
yes. Right, so we'd use the same performance standard as we utilize in notices of intent and requests for determination of applicability. All right, was that a motion?
That was a
Yes,
motion.
it was.
And I
Jackie,
second, so.
Did you get the components of that motion?
Yep, I did.
All right.
Thank you.
Did you have a
Good
question?
job, Kathy.
Yeah, I think what your chemist is looking for.
Can you identify yourself for the record and use the mic so the public can hear? Sorry.
You people were looking at the residual effect of the chemicals.
Yes.
When you ask the chemist to identify the chemical,
Yes.
you should ask them to identify the half-life of the chemical.
Right. Yeah, I think that would be within the standard protocol. I
Not
mean, it's a
just-
good point.
Not just to say it's salt or it's X.
Right.
What's the half-life of it?
The half-life of glyphosate is pretty long. Over 50% of school kids, I recently read, in this country have got detectable levels of Roundup
Really?
Really?
in their blood.
Makes
It's
sense.
frightening.
Wow.
Frightening.
We would normally expect, and we can require, that we get an MSDS data sheet for any and all chemicals that would, and that lists
Yeah,
all
they're
of
all,
their
these
properties.
are all
and-
publicly available.
Yeah,
Is this the house, the last house on Forbes Road?
No.
no,
And we're not sure which house it is. That's part of the discussion. We don't know the source. We know the location, we don't know the source.
Where's the location?
you will recall this from the Conservation Commission days when Sandy Will was rehabbing the wharf.
Right.
And we walked the pathway down, it's sort of diagonally across the face of the hill.
Right.
And Bernie Lynch's property is on the left and Sandy Will is on the right.
Right.
That's where it is.
Okay.
If you
On the
walk-
left,
If you
on the
walked, it's on the left.
Everything on the left, within like probably 150 feet of the path.
There's a hill leading down into a hollow that goes to the river.
Like 150 feet wide, but probably 200 or 250 feet long.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So that was the
Thank you.
motion.
Yes? So moved?
Second?
Second?
Discussion? All in favor? Great, great, thanks. Kathy, I'll work with you tomorrow to see if we can get those letters out the door.
Okay, great.
That's good, thank you very much. All right, so now we're going to go back to the beginning, and this is number one, request for determination of applicability, 111 Unquity Road, which is the Yulin Skating Rink. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Robert O'Connell. I'm the Director of Buildings and Grounds at Curry College in Milton, and we are the manager of the Yulin Skating Rink for the town of Milton, who is the permittee of the state and the DCR. And we're here in regards to repaving the side parking lot, which is used by employees, and the Zamboni dumping area for snow removal, for about approximately a 60-foot by 60-foot repavement. I believe you had a site walk 2 weeks ago, and I'm here on behalf of Bill Clark to answer any questions you have in that regard.
Fair enough. Can you walk us through the proposed riprap plan and give us some dimensions as to how far into the, I'll call it the wetland area, irrespective of where the line is, but I'm just calling the
Right.
forested area or the wetland
Okay.
area.
So, my understanding from meeting with Bill Clark is that you have a lot of invasives here that he wants removed, and he's going to manage that. And we're proposing as the manager of the rink, and we have a capital commitment as the manager of the rink. So we would be providing the pavement work. The extent of the pavement work is approximately 60 feet off the corner of the building and 60 feet off the existing walk. We met with this couple of contractors there recently, and we originally had riprap in this area, put in as a level spreader type riprap, so that any water that came down in this area would run off level and not create a rivulet type area. And we have also decided that there should be some additional riprap here. Currently, the pavement is pitched from the building this way, and we're going to have it pitched from here to this corner, and from here this way. We do not use any chemicals in that area, because you can't get the chemicals on the Zamboni tires and then go out on the ice. So it's a clean area, it's kept swept. The only issue that we would have as far as chemicals would be if there was some type of leak. We have Speedy Dry on site, we would have containment for any of that. And as far as the riprap, we're talking probably somewhere between a third and a half of the way of the 50 feet either direction. As far as containment in, Bill Clark had mentioned some type of guardrail, and I told him the problem with the guardrail is that the area you need to put it is required for emergency exit, escape route from the rink. As a matter of fact, during the heavy snow 2 years ago, we had to keep the perimeter of the rink because there are 3 pair of 6-foot wide emergency exits at the rear of the building. And the code requires that they be able to get to an accessible route. So the riprap, I believe, in itself will keep people from driving in that area. We're going to be using 6 to 8 inch riprap. You're not going to be looking to drive on that. And the extent of that riprap will probably be about 6 feet off of the pavement.
What we were probably concerned about is under snow conditions when that riprap is covered.
Mm-hmm.
Material being pushed, as clean as it is, into the wetland. And the notion of the rail was discussed, and also discussed was the notion of having boulders there. So that would be on the
Something to
far
limit the
side of
push.
the riprap.
Now, on the far side of the riprap, we could put some boulders on the first section, and what happens is the machine comes out and it dumps, and then usually, depending on the season, but in the middle of the winter, at its worst point, once a week, we send a loader down to pile that snow, particularly if it's very cold, because there's no melt. The newer rinks have a melt tank inside the rink, and they melt the snow internally. The long-term improvement plan for the rink is to put in one of those. Short-term, we have the condition that exists. It's not a good condition. It damages the Zamboni. We've had broken axles and other material. It's time to be repaired. And I think the riprap will add a lot, but if you want some large boulders on the backside, again, we can't put them on,
Right, we don't want them up there. We just want
the
them
emergency
on the
exit
backside of the riprap,
but
that's
on the
all.
backside, not a
Yep.
problem.
Great.
Is the Zamboni hydraulic, or is it diesel?
It's electric, but it's electric hydraulic.
Electric
So it
hydraulic.
has 2 large electric motors that run the drive. One runs the drive mechanism, one runs the hydraulics for the other pumps.
Okay, and if it has a leak, you know right away because it's dripping on the
Oh, yeah,
on
can't
the
have it
ice.
drip on the
Can't
ice.
have it,
No.
right?
Actually, it will make a hole right through the ice fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So it's inspected for that. We keep it clean.
Keep it on,
We have an arrangement with the DCR that if our Zamboni goes down for the Yulin rink, we get a spare. Again, long-term is a new machine. The machine that's down there is a 98. It's past its useful lifespan.
Do you have the specs for the riprap? Because when we were there, we understand the access for emergency vehicles. But at least what I had envisioned was, if you take the line of the must be the north side of the rink,
Okay.
and you draw it directly out, you just continue the line of the rink out to the street.
Straight out is the corner of the lot, and the riprap would be behind that.
Right, so that if the pavement stops at the line
Right.
that is an extension of the building line, right out to the street.
Not to the street.
No, the line. If you were to just imagine a line running from
Okay.
the building, it actually,
Right here, right out to the street.
right, but if you take this line here.
Yep.
And you just continue it right out in the direction, I know it stops short of the street, but that's the line, correct?
Correct.
And then what we need to know is how far from that line, that's the pavement line.
Right.
How far into towards the wetlands?
6 feet.
It's 6 feet. And do you know what this dimension is?
It's about a third of the 50 feet. So, we could call it 20 feet if you want to go more than that.
Okay, this way.
Correct. So.
Oh, I'm sorry,
So
this way,
20
yeah.
20 feet from here to here, and
By
then
6
20
feet.
feet from here to here. Because when we're there on the site, a lot of the water runs this way into an existing trough. And we want to pick that up as well. So we want to put riprap here and riprap here. This line here is actually going to get moved back because that existing trough exists right in here. So this line's going to move back to here. So the extent of payment that showed is a little, slightly less.
Okay.
It'll be riprap 20 feet by 6 feet by 6 feet.
All right, now, where do you envision the boulders? Because we were talking about some kind of bollard there,
Right.
or a boulder. It doesn't matter to us, but historically, and this
I
has
would
been
put
going
them
on for a long time.
Just after the 6 foot of riprap on the, right behind the riprap.
Right.
'Cause
That's what you'd
On the
like,
wetland
right?
side
It is.
only. Yes.
it's on the wetland side. However, historically, and goes long before Curry, goes way back before DCR, and we used to have this issue with the MDC every year, because the snow would go up and over the top. We did have a guardrail there for years.
Yep.
But the guardrail didn't do anything because it was about 30 inches high,
Right.
and the snow was about 10 feet high. So it didn't do much.
Right.
What's the plan for not having the same thing happen to the boulders? Because what we're trying to avoid is just sort of dumping
Well, I can tell you that.
beyond this riprap.
I've been in front of you several times through the years, and that if I tell you that's what we're gonna do,
Right.
I'm pretty comfortable that you would say, yep, Bob told us that's what he's gonna do. However.
I agree with that.
Cannot speak for
Right.
the next manager.
That's
So we can put the boulders there, and I can tell you that the snow will not go beyond those boulders while we manage the rink. We have a one-year permit that ends on April 30th of 17. We're in negotiations with the town and the DCR for a long-term permit. So I can tell you from now until April what will happen. I cannot speak after that.
Well, let's just make it a condition, the snow does not go beyond the boulders.
But the snow melts into the wetland anyway, doesn't it? It's
Yes.
going to go into the wetland
Yes.
one way or the other. So I don't see what is the problem exactly. If it's dumped directly or if it slowly melts in. I mean, I'd be concerned about, tire tracks in the wetland compacting the soil or something, but
Right.
the snow itself.
I think originally and historically, we had two problems. One is that the front-end loader was going way too far into the wetlands to dump.
Okay.
Because they wanted to keep the 10 feet down to 6 feet. So they just kept pushing it further in. So that was a problem, getting the equipment in the wetlands. And
Okay,
you see how
I can
close
that.
it is.
Yeah.
And the second issue is that, and I think, Bob, you've done a good job using some kind of a dry well or some kind of a melting box. At the end of the season or twice a year, when you scrape the ice,
well-
that is a problem.
So.
Because we're getting then paint and some
Right.
chemicals.
So, in the past, the DCI would either melt it and then take the remnants and put it outside, or they'd melt it and put it down the sewer. Since we took over the rink, the material that's used to paint the ice is actually, the ice gets painted. Once there's about 1/4 of an inch of ice built up, the ice gets painted. And then you build up another inch to 1.5 inches of ice, depending on if you have figure skaters or not. On top of that, that's clear ice. So when the Zamboni goes out and does its work, it's clear ice. The only thing that could be in there, spit or maybe a little blood if somebody got hurt.
Spit and blood.
So you could get those
Rocky.
contaminants.
That's right.
But there is no paint. The paint, I can get you a MSDS sheet on the paint, and it's non-hazardous, it's environmentally friendly, it breaks down. You could put it in the wetlands. We, however, do not do that. At the end of the year, we leave approximately 1 inch of ice. We let it melt to the point where it pops from the concrete deck, because it's actually physically attached. You let it melt for a week, it pops. You go in with a forklift, you take it out. We hire a 30-yard dumpster. We put 6 tons of fine sand in the dumpster. We put the ice in the dumpster. The ice melts, the contaminants stay behind, including the paint that's environmentally friendly, and that goes off site. And that's how we do it.
Sounds like a nice strategy.
But I
And
think
that's
Yeah.
best
Good.
practice. We
Best
didn't
practice.
do this.
Right.
We checked around, and that's best practice.
Yeah, sounds
to
good.
Judith's point, and I'm very happy with the extensions that you have of the troughs. It's very, very wise. Melting into the troughs helps with the dissipation of the water. When it's outside, that contributes to erosion. It's not going into the trough and then
Oh, I
bleeding
suppose,
gradually
yeah.
into
It
the
does
soil.
make a difference.
If it's on the other side, then you
Yeah,
get
that's true.
erosion factors.
I see.
So that's why, if it doesn't go beyond the boulders, that's why I'm suggesting a condition.
I see.
Does, if Bob's off-site a year from now, he wins the lottery, he's gone. His successor knows what he's got to do.
Can I ask a question, point of clarification? So what we're talking about is just the ice or the refuse that's coming off of the inside of the building? We're not talking about the parking lot? That's a whole different thing?
Where does that go? That's
Because
not.
chemicals in keeping the, the parking lot dry, clean, safe, and
We don't use any
ice-free.
chemicals.
Can't with the
Because the
Zamboni.
Zamboni would bring them and contaminate the ice.
Two
There are
different
parking
issues.
lots.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because this is right outside where the Zamboni
Right.
goes in and out.
So this is the manager's / Zamboni lot, service entrance.
okay.
The main lot of 97 cars is down to the
We're
left.
not talking about
Right.
that.
We're not
That's
touching
over
that.
here.
Just this. Got it.
That
Yep.
is another,
Okay.
that's a different problem.
Yep. I just
Because
wanted
you-
to, I
you
just
do
want to
use-
clarify it.
That gets salted by the town. The town actually, our management package with the town is that we manage the rink, we manage the side lot and the snow from the Zamboni. The main lot is maintained by the town. So the town, DPW manages that. They clean it, they salt it, they sand it. Light snow, they do it themselves. Heavy snow, they outsource that.
Just want to clarify that. I didn't. Thank you.
Now, there's one other thing, and that is, as we looked at it on July 2nd, we've got sort of a rough design here as being outside the 25-foot non-disturbance zone.
Yes.
And that assumes that we verify the line where it is.
Right.
We had asked for soil logs, because I think the botanist, Lenore White,
not.
had done it by foliage as opposed to soil. Now, she said she did some soils but didn't keep the logs, because I asked Bill Clark to ask her if she had the soil logs, and she does not. I just talked to him tonight
Okay.
as I was walking in here. So we're going to be, in order to approve this tonight, we have to approve that line. And it's done without soil logs. And the only issue to that is whether or not it stays outside the 25-foot zone. Now, this is not an engineering diagram.
Right.
And this is probably an unfair question to you,
supersedes it.
Bob, but can you,
Okay.
can you tell on that map, if you go to the edge of the paved area, which you've already delineated for us, and you add 6 feet where the riprap would go, can you give us some assurance that that's outside the 20-foot zone? And the 25-foot zone is actually marked on that map right there.
It's 25 feet, so here's your, this is probably your determination flag, and you can see the 25-foot buffer zone.
Right.
And what we can do is we can talk to Jim Burke, who did this, and we can get this line flagged and commit to not moving within the 25-foot line.
Right.
And if it means we're 5.5 feet as opposed to
Right.
6 feet strong,
Right.
then we can do that.
Good. That's what I
When
was
was
looking
this flagged? What's the date on this?
for. Lenore White did it within the last 2
Just-
weeks.
Just recently.
Just
2
recently?
weeks, no,
Yeah.
this is,
I think 3-4 weeks ago at the most.
Okay,
it was maybe 10 days before we saw it on the 2nd of July.
okay.
Yeah, those are new flags.
Okay. So within the month. All right, are there any other questions from commissioners?
So this would continue then a revised plan and submit like the boulders,
Yes.
wraps, everything showing on the plan.
Yeah, we would need that, but we could
Contingent.
take a vote contingent
Yeah.
upon the submission of that on
She did it on June 22.
June 22. All right. Other questions from abutters or members of the public? So I would entertain a motion to, and this is a request for determination of applicability, and I think we can issue a negative determination based upon that line and then all of the contingencies. And by the way, Bob, and I think you've already said this, but one of the contingencies that I would like to include in a negative determination is to have a spill response plan for the Zamboni.
Okay?
And what the plan would include would be something you probably already do, and that would be have speedy dry on site.
Yes.
You know, some kind of mechanism to protect it. If there is a hydraulic compromise and the Zamboni's out there, we want to be able to stop whatever's leaking
Right.
right away.
Okay.
And that's, you know, a sort of a.
Yeah, we have a verbal plan, we don't have a written plan, but we can put that together very quickly.
Good. I know you've got them at Curry.
Sounds good.
We do.
Okay. All right, so I'd like to add that as a contingency. And then the 6 to 8 foot riprap would be dependent upon staying outside of the 25-foot non-disturbance zone from the flags as delineated by Lenore White,
Correct.
Including the boulders.
including the boulders.
Right.
Right,
So the boulders are effectively at the back edge of the riprap.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what we'll end up doing is the boulders will be
First.
just
Yeah.
outside the line, and then the riprap will be from their end.
Right.
I don't think there's much more room than that.
That snow does not go over the boulders.
Good luck. Good luck on that one. After, how many years? I used to skate there as a little kid outside the rink. And I think it's always been there. But that's the idea, and that's the way the permit will be written, that, you know, the snow has to stay
Right.
on the, is it the
Riprap side of the
south
boulders.
side of the riprap, well, the pavement side of the, yeah, the riprap side of the boulders.
Yeah.
Correct.
Because you want it to melt into the riprap.
Right, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
All right, so with those contingencies, is there a motion? Now, this would be conditional upon the submission and approval of a revised plan
Right.
to show this.
So moved.
Discussion? Second?
Second?
Okay, discussion? All in favor? Okay, good. That's a negative determination, which means you're ready to go with those contingencies, under those conditions, contingent upon receipt of the revised plan.
Should have it next week.
Perfect, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good, thanks,
You
Bob.
too, Bob.
Next on the agenda is 251 Canton Avenue.
Thanks.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. Robert Gatnick, 251 Canton Ave. Filed a notice of intent for an addition to the rear of our house at 251 Canton Ave. We're in a butter to the town brook, or Pine Tree Brook, I guess it is, behind our house. And apparently, the addition is falling within the 250-foot buffer.
200. Yep.
200-foot buffer, yeah. So we're outside of the 100-foot buffer, but within the 200-foot buffer. I was informed that I needed to file the paperwork, which I did, submitted the plan, here for the hearing.
Excellent. And you're right next to the Glover School.
That's correct.
You ever see the ducks come by when they have the whole?
On the other side.
Ducks,
Oh, they do go under the bridge there in inclement weather to get some shelter.
I see the 100-foot buffer,
Correct.
and I see the 200-foot buffer. And you're right, because Pine Tree Brook is a perennial stream, it's part of the Rivers Protection Act, which gives us a 200-foot jurisdiction.
Correct. Which engulfs my entire house.
So,
Yes. Right.
so the proposed renovation is how big?
It's an addition off the rear of the house. It's 15 and a half feet going back and about 35 or 6 feet in width.
All right. And do you have a calculation of the amount of increased impervious surface? And I'll tell you where I'm going.
It's already impervious. The area that we're actually putting the foundation and the addition on is currently a patio and a deck.
And the deck is above what?
Above well, the deck is still staying as a deck, I guess. It's more just the patio area that's where the foundation is.
All right, so this, I see the,
You see the note existing deck?
Yes.
I do.
That's staying as is. And then the area where the proposed renovation is, that area is currently a patio.
Oh, okay.
So where's the addition? Is it a renovation or an addition?
It's a renovation and an addition off the back, so there's a bump out off the back of the house.
So on the side, that's,
Look at the bottom right-hand corner on the cross-section. You see the addition on the back.
Oh, right.
but on the side, that's not an addition. That's the existing garage.
That's existing.
You're not adding on to that area, are you?
This area here?
Yeah.
That's
This is
the,
garage.
that's the existing footprint.
Okay,
Right.
so there's no additional thrusting out there at all? So it's just in the back of the house
Correct.
that you're pushing out? Okay.
So it's not a proposed renovation, it's an addition.
It's both.
Could you, I don't understand.
Renovating the existing house
The
and,
interior.
and adding an addition to the back of the house.
Okay. There's a dashed line that has an L shape, comes up the back and then folds into the stair of the deck.
That's kinda
Everything to the right of that is an addition.
Correct.
Okay. You also show on the section a pergola and a paving area behind that, and I assume that that's within the hay bales, but not shown on the plan?
That is something that I was taken by the engineer from, I think maybe a little bit of, the architect kind of added some
Sure.
detail to the plan that may or may not actually be built, I think, just
Yeah.
to, show what could be there. I don't know that we're actually gonna wind up with that, but.
Okay. But if it does get built, we want to know about it,
Sure.
just because we're concerned, I mean,
Well, we can't approve a plan that, I mean,
Right.
we can only approve a plan that's the real plan.
Okay, well, then let's say that that's gonna be there then.
And where are you,
no, this section, the
You're
section
showing a
down.
footing and a pergola
It's
in
right
the
here,
back?
this
Yeah.
is the back, that's the addition, and then there's a pergola, and which basically comes in behind this. It's like a patio behind the addition. Right, that's the addition.
All right, so and that goes back to my first question, because what we're looking for is an increase in impervious surface, so that apparently would be.
Right.
And then we need drainage calculations to find out where that's going to go. Most of the time, when you do an addition, it's, it's on something that's pervious, and then when you build the building, we just need to know where the runoff goes. It's
Okay.
not a big deal, because
Yep.
you could probably just put some kind of a,
Coltech.
Cultec.
Dry
just
well.
A dry well.
Sure.
But
Now,
we need to know it.
You're putting in a new basement as well in the addition? A full basement?
There is space underneath, yeah, it's 3 stories to go up. The grade is from Canton Ave to the back, drops down like this, and then goes up again as it heads back towards the brook.
All right, and so now I'm lost. Are you saying that this, I can't even read it.
Patio.
What's it called? Yeah, the patio extended, which is not on the map here. It's on the detail, but it's not on the map.
The plan.
Sorry.
The plan. Sorry.
So we don't have any, or at least I don't have any specs as to how far that would go. It sounds like you want to hold that as an option. I'm not sure what you're saying, but we need to know what it is so that we can do some calculations and figure out what the change in surface is.
Okay,
What this discussion is all about is making sure that any additional runoff is controlled, so we catch it, that you catch it,
okay,
and that we put it back into the ground using a dry well or an engineered dry well like a Coltec or something like that. So in order to determine how big that device needs to be, or maybe you need 2, given the amount of area,
Okay.
we need to have a realistic understanding of how much of the property is no longer permeable.
right.
So the addition plus the new patio are both going to be impermeable, and all of that area is going to need to be put back into the ground through a drywall. And that's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's our biggest issue here, because you're outside the 100-foot, and it's a reasonable addition to to your house, and we're just looking for control of that water so that it doesn't cause problems in terms of erosion
Sure.
or concentrated kind of causing problems downstream.
Sure.
So understanding the plan, both in terms of the addition and in terms of this patio that may or may not occur,
Okay,
so that we can say that the dry well or the device you're going to use to control that runoff is appropriately sized. That's pretty much the discussion. And if you can show us that, then I think the issue is resolved.
okay.
And does anyone else have any other issues in terms other than the rainwater?
I think we need to see a plan that's the exact plan you're building, not speculation in any sense, and I think we need that on file.
Okay.
This smaller section down here, I think it would be helpful to blow it up so people could see it a little more clearly and delete any, possible in the future, but what you're actually currently planning to do and you're asking us to okay.
Okay.
When are you hoping to break ground on this?
Probably the end of August, September. Plans are in with the building department right now.
Yeah, we try to work with people, so we don't want to slow you down.
So, yeah.
And I think that was the origin of that question. Because I'd like to see, and I'd like to see on the overhead view of the plan,
Yeah.
how far back this patio that you're.
But you want to see the patio on the
Yeah.
plan view?
Yeah, right.
That's
And,
fine.
and with dimensions of the.
Calculation of the.
Just so that we can size the drywall, and
Yeah, that's
if
fine.
you can do that, then I believe that resolves, I mean, do you have other issues other than, because you're outside the 100
I think
foot.
it's net pervious to impervious. I
Right.
think that's really
Yeah.
the crux of it,
So it's-
right?
Yeah, if you can do that and resolve it, then I believe that's the only issue
So
we're
is the
going to have.
calculation actually just the new patio area? Or because if
And the
if the addition's actually on top of an existing patio, is that considered impervious currently, or is that?
It is.
It is, right.
So do I-
She just
so-
said
The
net.
net difference that we're
It's the
looking for.
net difference that
Yeah.
we're looking for.
Okay.
And it's easy to accommodate that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a cost factor. I mean, to drop a dry well in is, I don't know, not much, shouldn't be a cost factor.
Can I hold you to that?
I'll dig the hole.
Agree.
And what is back here now? Is it, how far back does it go in terms of landscaped? And how far does, how
How
close
far
do you?
back does what go?
Your
The landscaping.
landscaping in the property.
Well, it's a yard all the way to the back.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah.
All the way to the,
Brook.
is it
Well,
right
it's
to
not
the,
grass right to the
Property
property. There's
line.
a flower bed and mulch and
Yeah.
whatnot, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a buffer back there, yeah.
all right. And what about lighting in the area? Are you contemplating anything on your house that would have
Probably just
floodlights?
standard outdoor lighting like we have now, just attached to the new addition, I guess. Nothing extraordinarily different than what's there now.
Okay. No, it's just, it's
Not
some.
anything closer to the river or anything. That's where you're
Right,
getting
and
at,
that,
right?
where I'm going with that is like,
Yeah.
Bob O'Connell was just here. He's been coming in here for 20 years for
Sure.
Curry College. And sometimes, because they're in a very sensitive area, we
Yeah.
ask them to put in lights that kind of reflect downward
Sure.
as opposed to outward. And that is good for wildlife and the brook and whatnot.
Sure.
So can you give us some plans on what you intend to put there?
Sure.
Okay, that's easy. So with all, I mean, you're being very gracious and accommodating, which we appreciate. But if we ask you to come back with that in our August meeting, is that going to delay you?
No, because I don't think it delays what Joe's doing with the review of the plan anyway, so
Okay.
Okay.
shouldn't be an issue.
And if you can give us what we're talking about,
Yeah, if I can get those
then we can,
calculations.
get you going.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Any other questions from
I
commissioners?
just want to make sure we're clear, like with this meeting, you can submit it ideally, so we have it before the August meeting.
Did that disappear?
Does that get submitted through the
To
DPW
Kathy
or
Bowen.
Kathy?
comes to you?
Are there abutters, members of the public that would like to be heard? Yes, sir.
My name is Craig McNaught. I live across the brook, Pine Tree. He's done a wonderful plan. My only concern is the lighting. I know the gentleman and his kids skate in the backyard.
That's my neighbor's.
Pardon me?
That's the neighbor's house, right?
Was that your neighbor's house?
Yeah.
All right. I just don't want to make sure that we don't wind up with 1,000 watts of lights in the backyard, because it is a very sensitive environmental area.
And you're a sensitive person yourself.
Pardon me?
And you're a sensitive person. No, I appreciate that. That's a valid concern. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Question in the back, John?
Well, are you going to answer?
Yes, I just wanted to answer on the
And,
end.
yeah.
Okay.
Can you come forward so you can use the mic? Thanks.
I just wanted to comment that we have currently just motion-activated lighting in the back. We don't have any extensive lighting in the backyard, and we don't intend to. So I just wanted to assure you of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I appreciate it. So, any other questions, comments, suggestions? Then, with that in mind, do we have your assent to continue this until August? At which time, either then or before then, hopefully before then, you can give us a revised plan and the calculations, and it doesn't sound like a big issue.
Yeah, not a problem.
Terrific. All right.
If
Thank
you've
you.
missed some of the things we asked for or we commented on, Kathy has everything written down, and you can check in with her to make sure you covered all the points.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Like a dust mask, yes. It's a renovation.
What have I done?
167 Woodland.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find my
What are you looking
agenda.
for? Use that anyway.
Okay. All right, next on the agenda is 167 Woodland Road, and Kathy, I know you gave me the request, and I probably lost it. You've got it? Perfect, thank you very much. This is a request from the representative of the applicant, Paul Sullivan, and it's dated today? No, it's dated Monday, the 11th, at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it says, Kathy, we retained a new wetland scientist for Woodland Road, which led to some delays in revising the plans. They will be completed this week and maybe for tomorrow night, but it is uncertain, so I would like to postpone Woodland Road until August. I would like to be on the agenda for the July site walk. Regarding the payments for the peer review, you should have them this week for sure. Thanks, Paul. So I guess that's a request for a continuance. But do we need a site walk? Let's say we get the plans for 167. This is the one that we had Lenore did a report. So they're revising their plans, so we'll be able to compare. We've been out there a couple of times, right? So we'll be able to compare Lenore White's report with whoever their new wetland scientist is. So I don't think we need a site walk, do you?
No, I don't.
Anybody?
No. We have this memorized.
Yeah.
True. All right, so then at the applicant's request, do we agree to continue this until August?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, done. That's on for August. Next on the list is notice of intent, 118 Forbes Road. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Attorney Bob Sheffield, and I'm pleased to represent the applicant, John and Shelley Keith, who proposed to have an inclined lift at 118 Forbes Road that would bring them down to their deck. Not their deck, their dock. I understand that this may be the oldest commercial dock in the United States. And I've heard that said, but I'm not sure of it myself. But
That's good authority. I'm not sure either.
that's why I wanted to put a disclaimer on. I happened to be in Ireland for 3 weeks with my family, so I was unable to attend the walk. However, I want to address a couple of points that were brought up at the walk. Number one is, would the approval of this create a precedent that may be a problem of such elevators or inclined lifts going into the river there? And I think the answer is clear that it's not. And the reason for it is, number one, is every member of the household, which is the applicant, is a senior citizen. And this is very unusual that senior citizens would be creating something like this. And I think that that makes it in itself unusual, and also it makes it more reasonable insofar as being senior citizens, they are more concerned with handicap accessibility to the dock. The second item is this is the only practical method of accessing the dock which is on their property. And as will be seen when the engineer gives his report, alternative possibilities were considered and were thrown out because they would be, very harmful to the environment, the vegetation, and would also have reduced handicap accessibility. The third reason is that the properties to the north, and we were talking about the properties to the north earlier in tonight's session, all have a gradual incline going down to the water. And this has a very sharp vertical drop of about 45 feet, which would, and the angle going down is so sharp that this incline lift would be necessary. Also, all the properties to the south have no actual waterfront insofar as the waterfront is owned by DCR. So for these reasons, I don't think we have to be concerned with creating a precedent that would come back to haunt the Conservation Commission. I'd also say two other things came up in the walk that bear mentioning here, and one is that the Keiths voluntarily offered to repair or replace any vegetation that was disturbed or damaged during the creation of the incline lift. And I think that some members of the Conservation Commission remember the excellent job they did when when they created 1099 Brush Hill Road, and conservation land is adjacent to that property, and they went in at their own expense and removed all the dumping that had taken place, and there was tar removal, et cetera. And they did an excellent job at revegetating that property. So I think this offer is made in good faith and obviously would be taken care of. Finally, a question was made as to the structural stability of the incline elevator. And we've met with the building commissioner, and this will require a building permit. And the
Buck, can you hang on?
Good to go. Thank you.
building permit would not be issued unless it was consistent with the building code, unless it had sufficient engineering studies to show that it was safe, structurally sound, et cetera. And that, I think, is more in the purview of the building commissioner, and I think everybody knows that the building commissioner in this town really takes his job seriously and will put it onto the magnifying glass.
Well, apropos of that comment, shouldn't we await the building commissioner? Because, for instance, let's say he says that the stability requires some kind of a footing, and that the pipe is not, the pipe driven into the ground is not going to be sufficient to ensure stability, and you need to have a concrete footing in there. That's going to change our view of the disturbance to the hill.
In that case, would, I believe, have to come back, because I think that your approval would be conditioned on the plans that are submitted and the information that's supplied to this Conservation Commission. The thing is that we have several additional places we have to go. We have to get the approval of the building commissioner and issue a building permit. Because of the proximity to the lot line, and if there's a determination by the building commissioner that this is a structure, and I have no doubt that it will be, we'll have to go to the Board of Appeals and have the Board of Appeals approve it. We'll also have a Chapter 93 approval. We need several approvals, going down the line. U.S. Coastal Engineers may have something to say since this is a navigable way. So this is the beginning of a number of approvals that are required. And we gave a lot of thought into which order we should proceed. And we felt the Conservation Commission was the right place to go first. And if we have to come back because of a modification that somebody else is demanding, we are ready, willing, and able to come back.
All right, well, one of the concerns, I've got two concerns. Going back to your precedent to the north side or east.
South side. North side is towards the wharf, 88 Wharf Street.
That's north, okay. On that side, there are some steep slopes there to the houses. I agree with you on the other side because of the DCR land, which is actually my second point. But on the, just having landed my canoe at the base of Hutchinson Field, that's pretty steep. And then the houses go down there. They're pretty, I just climbed it about 2 weeks ago. So,
yes, but when you get down, for example, Lynch has a road going down that goes right to the water, and you can take a boat and put it in and everything else. That is not the type of incline that would suggest an elevator or an incline lift would be suitable.
all right. And the second point is that when we were there at the site walk, we all agreed that it would be less likely that the people all the way up to what is 156 Forbes, which is Michael Moore's house, the last one before the forest, the Forbes Woods, they would not be inclined to do it because DCR owns the land between their property and the river.
That's right.
Correct.
And that was my working assumption. In looking at this overhead projection, I was concerned, but I didn't realize that the DCR owns land between John and Shelley's property and the water. And I'm concerned that if this is a structure, and I think you just said you thought it was a structure, the setback, that looks like it, and I don't mean to leave you in the dark, say you can help me out, but what I'm looking at is a very, very narrow piece of land right here, because this apparently is DCR land. And if I remember where the string was, because we looked at the string, which basically delineated where this aerial tramway was going to go. How do you get a structure between those 2 points?
And that's where it actually would be going down, it'd be running right down.
Right, but if this is DCR land, and if John and Shelley's land is that narrow piece right there,
Right.
I mean, how do you get it in there?
Well, that's about 8 feet. It only requires the 8 feet. The issue is,
No, I know that, but I think I just heard you say you've got to go to the ZBA for a variance because you've got a structure.
Right.
You couldn't possibly fit a structure in that narrow piece of land.
well, you'd have to get a variance from the ZBA because of the lot line, the property line. And it is more close to the property line than an accessory structure would normally be allowed.
Your concern is that there isn't enough room within the property,
Correct.
right? That the property isn't wide enough and you would have to actually use some land off of the property to do it.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's
If-
not
when
our.
you look at
but-
that,
But it's not our purview. And that, if they can determine a way to do it, our review is whether or not it's acceptable from our perspective. If they can determine a method to achieve what they're proposing within their property that's acceptable to the building department, that's not our discussion.
Well, I appreciate what you just said, and I agree with what you said the way you said it. But my concern is we've got a structure here that's going to require some kind of a variance. I'd like to hear, like DCR, weigh in on that. And I don't know what DCR's position is. I had no idea that DCR land was abutting the tramway itself. I thought the DCR land stopped on the other side of their property. and it doesn't. It goes up and it pinches the wharf.
It goes close, right?
And I think that if the building commissioner were to say, we need footings to support this structure,
Yes.
that's going to have a significant impact on our ability to approve or not approve. I don't disagree with the purview as you've described it, and I know the limitations on our jurisdiction,
Yeah.
but if we have no, or I have no sense of confidence that, the pipe is going to work, and if a concrete sonotube or a footing or something that is going to be bigger and wider in order to support the stability of the structure, I'd like to know that now.
If I may,
Sure.
Jim Burke with Selberg and Associates. You have basically a package. If you want to call it a structure, you can call it a structure. It's a rail system, a simple little incline lift that is supported by steel 2-inch posts driven into the ground, 10 feet on center, which disperses the load as it moves down the slope. It's not a significant load to bear based on the construction methodology provided by the manufacturer. They're just driving posts into the ground, and most cases sand. In this particular case, the soils they have are a little bit more dense than that, and in some cases you're going to be running into some rubble and some which could considerably ledge, where you can actually core it and pin it, where it's about as solid as you're going to get. The thing is, I don't know how much the thing costs, but I would imagine that it costs enough that whoever's building it is going to be stable. That being said, as far as the building inspector is concerned, I would have to say he's going to review the plans as they are submitted. They don't know what the soil conditions are. When we did the survey for this particular job, we laid out where we wanted to put it. We put points 10 feet on that string, put a shot there, put a shot where the post was going to go, and put a shot on the other side. So we actually walked up that slope, and we have specific elevations of where these things are going to be driven. So it's not just something that they're slapping together. It's a proven technology, as you can see from the history of the pictures that have been provided that I've seen. So it seems to me, if the soil conditions require like some hand digging and to allow us to drill the rock to anchor that post, it's still kind of the same construction. It's still or just being able to drive
For concrete.
Yeah, I put that in there. I thought that
It's in the application.
It is in the
so-
application, but as as things go, and again, that's handwork. From a standpoint of the original proposal, when this first came across my desk, I was like, wow, this has no impact at all. This is as compared to putting a 6-foot wide set of wood stairs that switch back all the way down. We end up clear cutting 20 feet. I think we picked a path that was, limited with trees. I think we're clearing 1 tree, 2.
Well, that's actually a good point, because one of the concerns that we all voiced, and we thought we had resolved, is and again, I'm going to get I would call this north, but I think you're calling this north, right?
Right.
North is Boston.
What's that?
North is Boston.
So if
Because right there, the river runs east, right?
Yeah, river kind of runs east.
Yeah, right there, yeah.
when we were standing at the top of the slope, I think all of our concern was that we wanted to have enough cover so that the river view from the north side looking south, you wouldn't see it.
Okay.
Basically, as it goes down the hill, it would be covered by trees and
Yeah.
shrubbery and whatnot. So at least in my mind, I was thinking, you could move it. The only limitation on how far you moved it would be the angle so that you get to the wharf.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea that the DCR owned all this land. I thought that John and Shelley owned it all the way to the line, an extension of the line running from Forbes Road. Bob can see it. I know
Yeah,
you
no,
can't see
no,
it.
I know the land, and I'm aware of the pinch point. And we laid it out. There's room to put this in there. Now, whether it's a structure or not, and we have to go see Joe Prondak for a finding, I mean, that's just another permit. But, from an environmental standpoint, and as far as it's, this application with the Wetlands Protection Act, I think as far as access to waterfront that is, accessible for the landowner, this is a great, proposition. Because you could certainly, and I've looked at it, coming up with different ideas with regards to bringing stairs down this slope. And, everything was gone.
It might be a great proposition for the landowners, but it's a significant change for the public in the natural view all along the estuary. There's nothing else there that so interrupts, that will jump out as the built environment. As people canoe, as you're in a boat, as you're walking along, it's beautiful. What we've done in the last 25 years is fabulous. We've brought back belted kingfishers, we have osprey, and now we have eagles there. I would disagree with most of the points that have been brought forward, with all respect. This is a private benefit. If it were a public benefit, I could think about it more thoroughly. If the kids at Milton High, free and open to all, public benefit, wanted to put in some place to keep their rowboats, fine, that we would consider it. But we so zealously protect that 25-foot, that 100-foot, that 200-foot. This absolutely has precedent. I would disagree with you. It could definitely be repeated if someone couldn't go all the way to the water, but only go as far as the conservation, the state land. Why not put it halfway down to the state land? Anyone can walk on the state land. So every single house could put something halfway down and then enter the state property. So you could still have that, John. Just because it couldn't go all the way to the water, you could have these pieces all along. And just as I said on the sidewalk, there were ranch houses all along Forbes Road, and one after the other, beautiful mansions have been built. One can happen, the next can happen. This is exactly what could happen. It could destroy the beauty that we now see along the Neponset Estuary. And your idea that, well, they're elderly and handicap is a little bit different. Even handicap might take on another magnitude, might require a consideration. But elderly, people over 65, whatever, I can't see that. There's an alternative. We walked down to the wharf. They're allowed to walk down. They have permission to do it. It's not like they can't get down there. They can get down there. And that's a fragile slope. We don't really know. I like your idea, John, of first of all, let the building department look at it, let other people see what is actually required. But in terms of our duty to protect that area, we should not let something like this be built. It opens a whole Pandora's box. This may be nice, the next one could be ugly, whatever. We also protect the aesthetics there, and we have a strong obligation to do that.
I certainly can understand where you're coming from, but the benefits don't just go to the public. The private people deserve benefits as well. I mean,
But when you
can
are
I speak for
doing
a
the
second?
evaluation,
Can I just-
hold on one second to answer that. When you do the evaluation cost benefit, when it becomes only private, we take on a whole different standard. We do.
But at the same time, I mean, you were talking about the osprey and the eagles and the like. This particular project will have zero impact to that.
You have no idea.
You can't tell me that it's gonna.
You have no idea.
I absolutely can, because the fact is, you're looking at a slope that it was created by dump trucks. And, it has, I couldn't tell you the vegetation that's in there, but I was involved in the restoration of the project next door, which, again, that's helped out too. You can't say that, in these particular incline lifts, they're all over Winnipesaukee, which have eagles. They're all over up Bar Harbor, Maine, which have osprey. Just because someone has the benefit of owning waterfront and wishing to have access to it, and Mr. Keith is not getting down that slope. I'm sorry, it's not happening.
He's not getting up.
Oh, no.
He walked it with us the other
we.
day.
Neither are we.
You know,
I think
but-
Judy's point was
but
that
the thing is
go
that
around.
I'd hate to have this particular project be tied to public benefit just because, it can. And if you could, quantify the impacts to the environment of this particular 6-foot wide incline lift with, an electric motor at the top of the hill, 45 feet above the water, I'd love to see the study, because I can sit here and say that it'll have zero impact into that Ponce River, because that Ponce River is going to ebb and flood, and the fish are going to come, and the birds are going to come, and Mr. Keith and
Only if we
Shelley Keith are
protect
going
it
to sit at the bottom of the slope and enjoy
vigorously.
all of that.
Only if we protect it. And as John mentioned earlier, this is an area of critical environmental concern. And there aren't that many in Milton. This is one of them.
Agreed. And at the same time, you're talking about, in the Wetlands Protection Act, they also, there's I forget one of the but recreation. Recreation's part of it. And being able to access the waterfront and being able to use it passively or for fishing and the like, which is exactly what they'd like to do, is part of the act. And just because they're 45 feet above it and have waterfront, and they're providing an environmental solution to access that and meeting the standards of the Wetlands Protection Act, and just because you don't like it, I just think you should apply the regulations. That's all.
Oh, well, you can be assured we'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll do that. But let me go back to a question that I had, because again, I'm hung up on this, what I call a pinch point. I didn't know the DCR land was that close, and I know that the angle of the line that you put up, and we appreciated that, so you could see basically where it was going. But
Sure.
when I was looking at that line, I thought, gee, there is sufficient space to, as I'm looking down, to the left or to the north.
To the left. To Sandy's property line? Or to the
Yes, towards Sandy's house, okay?
It's certainly tight.
We
yeah.
wanted to make sure that there was enough of a buffer there so that you couldn't see it, or you couldn't see all of it anyway. If you're standing at 88 Wharf and looking back, or if you're at the town pier and you're looking back. And we thought there would be enough of a buffer that you could actually hide this, at least laterally. I know you can see it from the top, and you
Yeah.
can see it from the river.
Well, is that something we
But-
could accomplish with vegetation?
Well, we were talking about leaving the vegetation there and not touching it so that it would be hidden. But now I'm concerned that
we are
you
limited-
can't move it.
We
Hold
absolutely.
on now,
Yeah.
'cause I appreciated what you said to
Yep,
Judith.
sorry about
but
that.
If you're moving it to the right as you're looking down, or to the south, in order to create that buffer of trees and foliage, I think you're going to pinch onto the DCR land. I had no idea that the DCR had that land.
Well, I think honestly,
I think this map is a little in error as far as the actual boundary line. I think that this is much more accurate.
Well, the problem with that is, and I was going to say this to you, Bob, but that doesn't show that land. I see where the line
right here.
is. No, I know, I see where the line is,
this is-
but
this-
I thought the blue was the water.
But that's DCR's corner, right there.
It is, but this is, to me, this is in the Ponset River, and this is all, pretty blue. I thought that was water. Now, I granted,
Well,
it says
it
edge of
is.
water here.
It floods to that line.
It may flood to that, but it doesn't look like it's high mean water, and our measurements come off of high mean water. Right?
Yes, yeah, but, I mean, did you stand on these stairs?
Yeah.
I mean, you can see that those get wet. I mean,
Oh, sure, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that it's this angle here. I thought it was pointed more over here, to the very edge. In fact, we were looking here, and we were talking about having that buried so that it went below grade.
So,
But this is the section that I'm concerned with, that there's a buffer here, and I don't know if you've got enough swing to do that.
well, I mean, I agree with you. We're kind of tied into where we want to lay this out, and we flip-flopped, the landings on either side. But you know, we don't have a lot of play with regards to where this can go, or how the angle can go, because that's, I mean, that's our width. So, I mean, but
No,
I-
but
I
you
think-
see what I just had no idea. I thought the DCR land stopped there,
Right.
where my thumb is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had no idea that's a real pinch point. And my concern is, and I appreciate, Jim, what you said about, you know, an individual's right to use their land in conformance with the regs.
Right.
It's a good point. I think we've got a pretty good track record for respecting property owners' development of land. But I'm just hung up on what DCR's reaction to this is. I assume that they had a.
They
abutters
were
notice.
notified, I mean,
Yeah.
If I might make a comment, Eric Galley, I'm the project manager, landscape architect, and planner. I think the mapping with the aerial, you know, because of the curvature of the earth and other reasons, the lines are approximate, but the pinch point may be unnecessarily emphasized. The drawing in front of you is the survey done, so the width that is shown on that plan, we can fit the lift in the space available, and we're able to actually leave 10 or 15 feet of vegetation to the west, if you will, with Boston being north off the tip of the jetty. So there is space to maintain the existing vegetation, and we talked about that day in the field, augmenting that vegetation with additional evergreen plantings and so on. So the map may be a little bit misleading in terms of the geometry. Yes, DCR is the majority of the frontage, that's correct. The pitch point, though, is accurately shown in your plan set and on the survey here as well. So we can fit the lift through there. I think the other thing is we were careful to stake both the property line at the top of the bluff and at the bottom of the bank. So if there's a reason to go back and revisit that on site, and actually you can see where we staked the center line of the lift and where those 2 points are, top and bottom. If you want to go back and lay eyes on that again, it's all still there and certainly easy enough to do. And that may at least get you better bearings. And I also believe the inside corner
Yes.
of the DCR. So if I use this to point to, just for orientation, to pointing up, we had stakes down here at the bottom under the big oak tree. And there's a stake in the vegetation here. I don't know if you were able to see it, but there is
I thought the
a
big
new
oak
stake.
tree was the other way, on the north side.
The
That
oak's
is-
right here.
It is
Right.
north.
So I'm gonna call this north, this west. We'll say the river runs east-west.
Oh,
So
okay,
north
gotcha, all right,
towards
yeah,
Boston.
okay.
So, again, there's a stake down here showing you where this is. We have the center line staked, and we have a stake at this corner, and we also have a stake at the top.
Right.
So if we need to go back and revisit that, it's all there, and it's easy to do.
What's the width of the pinch point from DCR to the opposite property line?
off the top of my head, I want to say.
Is it like 10
20
feet?
No,
10 feet or 20 feet?
20 feet.
It's about 20 feet.
What scale is that?
This is 20 scale.
It's a 20 scale, so it's,
Thank you. You know, like 26 feet.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not.
To this point, there's a DCR sign there, and it was not observable from the dock. It was only when I left the dock and went down the steps and turned around that I could see it immediately to the right, which would be consistent with what you're saying.
Correct. It's for the two stairways that Jim referenced.
the stairways, if you recall, when we rebuilt that wharf, were required by, required by DEP so that, you know, people can actually walk the shoreline.
So the stairways are DCR land?
I think the stairs are actually on the Keith's land, but the stairways.
That's what I thought.
But the stairways were installed as part of the restoration of the wharf. So people that can actually walk along
Makes sense.
Right.
the shoreline, which is, you know, an
Pretty
American
tough.
right.
And that, if I recall correctly, is the effect of the message on the sign.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is what?
Access.
The stairs are there for access.
Right.
See, now that map is showing their property is going to the water here. Obviously, it doesn't. It stops short of the water, because this is all DCR land. They're showing their property is going right down to the water.
Well, you know, that's what I thought, because it looks like the blue
Yep.
is water. It's not.
No.
Intertidal, right? Is that what it
No,
is?
no,
Is it
no, just
intertidal?
That's the, so right here.
Is that what it
That
is?
swath right there, that's all DC.
I think so.
But just point to the water. I mean water.
The height and trees, well,
What does that
It's the
say,
edge
edge
of
of
the
water?
blue. It's
Is
the edge
that-
of
yeah, top of water at 10 a.m. Like I say, at high tide, it's all the way up here.
What is high tide at 10 a.m.? I mean,
It's
water at
just,
10
You know,
a.m.?
I asked them, get me edge of water, and just,
Picked it.
At what? At
Get me
10
edge of
a.m.?
water when you
That doesn't mean anything.
well,
The tide comes in and goes out? Come on. That's the water edge
The blue
at
is the
10
limit of
a.m.?
the high tide.
on January 29, 2013, so.
Is that high
But
tide
on
or
that
low
map,
tide?
you have from one side to the other, almost going in a straight line, when in fact, the property ends here, and then it juts out beyond the real property. So that's very misleading.
This is accurate.
Actually,
correct.
Judith,
Well, not
This is
according to
Judith.
this.
these
misleading.
GIS maps have caveats associated with them.
Don't-
This would be far more reliable
Yeah.
than the GIS map,
Yeah,
This is survey.
because I've used them under other circumstances, and they won't
It's
hold
more
up.
of a-
Yeah.
the map you have
Deeds
is
or anything else.
misleading.
Yeah, the precision of the drawing is more precise than the satellite photo.
Right. You can't use those with deeds, et cetera.
I like
Well,
this one because it
I'm not
shows
sure
north
that,
going
you know,
that way,
that
which I
the
think is-
high tide
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
is
I'm
all
sure it
that
does.
authentic either.
If you like, we can go out and shoot high tide.
No, I'm just hung up on the pinch point. That was.
But they're saying the pinch point's 26 feet. That's not,
The
when we're
rails
talking-
on the lift
Talking
are
about
48
6-foot wide
inches
rails or
apart.
something.
Right. And John, from what
Well,
I
it
saw,
was
it's not as
8.
tight as it appears on the GIS
I'm
Oh,
map.
sorry, it was
Okay.
8, yeah.
it was 8.
The rails are about 48 inches apart.
Right, and then you needed a couple feet on each side.
Right, I mean, what they like to have, particularly if you were to stick your arm out as you were going up and down, they like to have some clearance to any adjacent objects.
What was the overall width of the path?
We were looking for 10 feet.
10 feet.
But there were a couple of trees that we're trying to save within that, so
Right.
again, that's an issue with code enforcement to make sure on the building inspector front.
Sure, sure.
They'd be comfortable with those clearances being a little bit less than 10.
Can you give us I know that part of this has to be an estimate, but the reason that this became important to me is because I always thought that they had some flexibility in creating what I call a buffer that would actually hide the tramway. What do you think the distance would be of foliage, trees, shrubbery that could basically hide the tram?
At the minimal point, at the pinch
Yeah.
point, it gets down to about 10 feet at the very bottom. It might be 15. We can look at your scale again. 15 at the top. I think there's a couple other, based on the drawing that were submitted to you, at the bottom, maybe that's more like 6 or 7, and at the top, it's a little over 10 at the top.
Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to mention is there, as much as you can look at it in plan view, I think this is a view of the hillside. As much as you might look at it in plan view, you can see here's the big oak that everyone stood over. And you can see this line, this is sumac, staghorn sumac in here. So there's a line of vegetation that's naturally creating a buffer, keeping in mind these tracks are relatively low to the ground. And when the carriage is either at the top or the bottom, it's rarely, in transit. So with the sumac being sort of that vegetated line, that was the piece that we were looking at to maintain as much as possible in place for that buffer. This was a shot that we took in the fall, and we sort of dashed in, where we thought the lift would be going. So you can see to the far right in this photo, you can see the oak tree, you can see the approximate location of the lift, and the vegetation we're looking to keep in here. And somewhere through the middle here is the property line. And again, if we want to go back to the site, you can look at those stakes and see, exactly what those widths feel like.
But John, I think the idea that we're talking about hiding the tramway says that we value the beauty that exists currently. As
Well,
we're
the view
looking
is
all
something,
along.
it's part of the aesthetics that we protect, that's true.
Exactly.
But that's the only reason I'm hung up on that, because I think there's a
understand. I understand
way
what
to
you're
hide it. I just want to make sure you've got enough land to do it.
Right.
And also, we discussed the painting code for it.
Yeah.
It would not be steel, it would be colored either.
Yeah,
I
and
think
he's going to
there
show
were two
that.
color combinations that were recommended.
Right, we have some more information on that if you'd like to. One of the things I did want to go back and just sort of clarify a statement that had been made. That day, we walked across the neighbor's property to take a long way to get down there through the sloped drive. But there is no formal agreement for my clients to have that kind of access. There's no formal easement. There's no provisions for any easement. There's no dialogue about such an easement. And it's unclear whether an easement would be granted. So we did something that they may not be able to do in the future, particularly if this land is controlled by someone else. So they have no legal access through this other person's property to get down to the land that they own. So the reason we're pursuing this project is because they're looking to establish the least impactful, most responsible way of getting down and getting to the jetty and getting to the river. So it was something that was kind of talked about. We got down there and this was a gentle slope. That's not really going to be a viable option, and it's not going to be something that can be formalized either in terms of the way these landowners access the jetty that they own.
If Mr. Will were to sell to somebody else,
Oh, I understand that.
there's no right to traverse that property in order to get to the dock. So the dock would essentially be inaccessible,
Understood.
except by boat.
Any other questions from commissioners? Other abutters, members of the public that have a question or comment? Kathy, did DEP come in with any comments?
It's still under review.
Well, I would certainly like to hear DEP's comments on this. And DCR was notified, you say they're notified?
Yes, they are.
And they haven't said anything. Is there any way to expedite a DEP comment?
Not that I'm aware of.
They go in Eastern DEP time. All right.
The engineer has some other graphs that they'd like to show.
Sure. Landscape architect, but that's okay. I wanted to, just so we all are sort of refamiliarized with the system. So the idea is that these posts are driven into the ground. This rail system is attached to it. And then the trolley, the carriage, is winched up and down that system. And this is it's about 4 feet apart. And the posts also have diagonal bracing. It's one thing I think when you kind of imagine these like toothpicks sticking up out of the ground and if the slope wasn't stable. But they have a diagonal bracing in certain situations, so that helps reinforce, as Jim was saying, to treat it like one uniform system, so it spreads out the load. And the carriage, I think, is rated for 860 pounds, so it's a relatively light-duty frame. It's got a winch at the top that raises and lowers the carriage up and down the track.
Eric, can I ask you some questions that I asked you on the 2nd of July?
Sure.
But to the extent that the public really wasn't around then, there may be some people in the audience or in the television viewing audience might be interested. Can you give us a little bit more description? I mean, is there a noise to the motor? How wide is it going to be?
Sure. It's 2 parallel tracks. I think the actual dimension of the rails is 42 inches, but I'm going to use 48 as the width. There's some flexibility in the width of the carriage. And it consists of the rail system that goes down, the posts that support the rail, and then a carriage that almost like a small basket sits within. And that has a guardrail around it, a door that you open and close, has a railing to keep people within it. And there's usually a bench or something to sit on as you go up and down. So it allows not only people, but it would allow the ability to move. They have to maintain this dock, so hand tools, equipment like that, maybe to mow this edge over time. It allows access for equipment up and down the slope as well. So it's about 100 feet. The cart moves at about a foot a second, something like that. And basically gravity takes it to the bottom. The winch just unspools it, and then it's through an electric motor at the top that then winds the winch back up and pulls the carriage to the top of the slope. It's about as loud. We had a couple references provided by the installer. He said like a dishwasher. I said, well, what's that mean? 50 to 65 decibels is a comparable. Someone else said it's like a swimming pool pump when it's operating. So there's those sort of reference points. I think they can be more specific given time to respond, if that's not an adequate description of the noise level. About a dishwasher was what I was told.
One of the questions was about the wheels and whether or not the sounds of the wheels moving on the track was an issue with noise, and whether or not if they were metal, they could be nylon or some other non-jarring.
Right. Yeah, those are good points. So we've been looking at that, and there are alternative wheels to a metal wheel. Yeah. There are a high-density polyethylene wheel that's made through a special process. At this point, the downside of that wheel is it's white in color. Mm-hmm. So there's an aesthetic component that might be a consideration in terms of recommending one over the other. They characterized the metal wheels as relatively low noise. You know, there wasn't like a screeching of a trolley car, or someone was asking about that. And I'm sure we could get, footage if we are set up to look at that, if you'd like to see one in operation. They're in Maine. They're in Maine this week, correct? And so they're installing one up in the Bar Harbor area of Maine, and I'm sure that if that's something you want to hear and sort of look at, we can do that. But so there are options on the wheel. That's the short answer. The longer piece of that is they may not be aesthetically things that you need to consider. I did put this board together just to show you. This is White Cliffs in Plymouth. I didn't take this picture, but it was taken late in November. And I don't know if their system is galvanized or painted, maybe the same color to match these gates, but it definitely stands out in the shadow of the slope. This one is a project that was done in Belize. It was painted green because it's mostly green there all the time. Maybe that's a good decision. This one was in Ontario.
Eric, can I stop you there? Go back to the green one.
Yes.
Are you showing us that for color, or
Just color.
is that what the rails actually
No,
look
it's
like?
not. It's a different system. It's one we looked at. We set it aside because it has a higher profile and this beam is a lot heavier. So this system would have less posts, but it would have a bigger footing at the top and the bottom. It would be a heavier beam. So I'm just showing you the color,
okay,
so you can sort of see what a green. But I think in a green setting, a tropical setting, that works. And then this one, I'll put this on the table, but this is a boathouse, I think Lake Joseph up in Ontario. And you can see the rail very, very slightly. I'll let you pass it around. It's just to the right of the boathouse. Yeah. It's sort of a charcoal color. And I think here, the Four Seasons of charcoal might be something worth considering over the green, personally. But you can think about that. And then I also brought this just to show this is some examples of kind of taking the components I put on the table. Here's an example of, I think this is Mike's son, so this is the installer's son actually showing how this is going in. So here's a small jackhammer on the end with a modified shoe that's driving the post into the ground. There's the clipping system, the cross members, here's the rails coming down. Here's what it looks like with a couple of sections put together. The posts are about every 10 feet apart going up the slope. Here's a completed one in the galvanized state. And this was sent to us today. This is a picture of what they're doing in Maine. So this is actually the trolley system is below with the wheels, and this is the carriage or the basket sitting at the bottom. And you can see how in this system they've actually cut it down into the grade to keep it visually less. There's no staircase. You just open the gate and step out. We talked a little bit about that. Of course, this requires a little excavation, but visually it's a lot less impactful. And you can see the color that they chose for that one. And they have a lot of evergreen. They have a lot of juniper, so maybe that's a good color in that instance.
In that scenario with the pit, it requires a guardrail, right? To keep people from falling into the pit when the lift isn't there?
Right, there may be a double rail that's part of that installation. I think we'd have to work through that with building. Literally, they were working on it yesterday, so it is in process. So it may have, again, which if it was painted, again, I wouldn't be thinking about this color here, but, if it was painted a bronze or charcoal to just kind of disappear into the shadow and the understory, especially, half of the year it needs to blend in. You would have a light railing system to keep that possibility out. So this is, I think you asked a little bit about just sort of more current photos of installation. I think one of the other things I wanted to mention is we were looking at 25 to 30 posts, we believe, for this installation. I say we believe because if something happens with the bracing, they may need to add an additional post to provide the bracing that's necessary as they go down. But if you imagine, 25 of these posts fit in a square foot. So if you kind of consider the impact of the project, if you imagined a square 1 foot, you fit 25 posts. So basically, the entire post for this kind of system is a foot to a foot and a half of square foot impacts where the pipes are driven. I know there's variables like some might have to be hand dug and so on, but order of magnitude, and I think that was Jim's point, this is a very low impact solution for getting posts in and then establishing this kind of system on the slope.
You might want to talk about the
Oh,
alternatives.
yeah, and I showed this, but I'll go through it again. This was one that we talked about a little bit on site. I'm not sure that everybody got to see it. Goes back a couple of years now. Originally, we started looking at just an inclined path, a grassed slope down. We wanted that slope to be no steeper than 10 to 1. That's steeper than an accessible route, but was something we thought was manageable. So what this envisioned is, in order to cover the grade change from 60 down to 15, elevation 15, a series of switchback pathways, reshaping the slope. We came basically all the way back. I think it ended up being about a half an acre of disturbance under this alternative that we had looked at. And when we cut a cross section through that, I think it was maybe more striking was that all this area in pink, all that soil would end up being removed and reshaped in order to get the zigzagging path down. So it would have required a half an acre of revegetation, a lot of wholesale removal of material in order to shape and grade that path. Because the existing slope is so steep, today that existing slope is this line here. It's essentially a 2 to 1 slope, or even slightly steeper than that. So in order to get a more gradual path, and we thought we could naturalize it, we thought we could do a pretty nice job creating some habitat along the way. But in terms of just square foot of impact, it became rather substantial. And an alternative to this that we really didn't study in great detail, but was the creation of a stair, which we talked about, I think, on site, was a staircase that came down. Because of the grade change, it would be something on the order of 80 or 90 risers and the series of landings that would come along with that. So in order to do a stair, that would be a very substantial and cumbersome structure, both in terms of invasiveness on the bank to get those footings and foundations in, and then just visually, it would also be, I think, very impactful to have some kind of staircase with sets of landings with over 80 risers. But I did bring these along just because I wanted you to see some of the other alternatives that have been looked at. And then, of course, the final solution that we came to, this is just a zoomed-in version showing the 26 feet of width. Here's the rail system coming through the upper platform, the lower platform. And then I just wanted to highlight that there is an electrical connection from the house to the motor at the top and a disconnect panel there. That's sort of the storyboards anyway.
I just need to comment and say that the alternatives you are showing us, I think, are not viable alternatives. None of those would be considered as well. No one's going to permit you to take. No one's going to permit you to take all that soil from the side of the bank. So I think those are sort of highly hypothetical alternatives
The
to what
project
you're
next
showing.
door was fairly substantial. We restored that slope, we removed a considerable amount of earth.
What project?
Sandy Wills.
Oh, are you talking about when he put in the wharf or when he
No, when we
clear cut the slope?
we had a permit for that, by the way.
Not from us.
Yes, from you.
Mistakes are made.
Yes, we did.
Mistakes
Look at the
are
history.
made.
I permitted a project to rip-wrap that slope. And it was later on that was revegetated. Look at the history.
He was here.
I know you were. You don't recall that part?
No, the permitting? Absolutely not.
I certainly do.
All right, any other questions? I'm just, looking at the original plan. Any comments? You can talk.
You just hit the button once. I think it might have muted it. Is the light red or green?
It is red. Now it's
Green is
green.
good.
Now it's green. Thank you. That was Rosemary Woods, wasn't Hillary. I would, and I'm not one to defer to some other agency, but I'd be very interested in DEP's comments, and I'm not happy. I have huge respect for individual rights to develop land. I also have huge respect for protecting the riverway. And I really would like to know what DEP, and for the public's benefit, we often have DEP comments where they look at the plans, and then we have the benefit of their view and their perspective. My biggest thing is the buffer, and I just need to be comfortable that there's an adequate buffer, and I know you said it runs from 6 to 7 feet at the bottom to around 10 feet at the top. My concern is if because of the structural component of it, that with the building commissioner or the zoning board or whatever, if it's considered a structure and if there's a setback, you can't fit it within 26 feet. I get that, but you could get a variance. We don't know. My hang-up is I want to make sure there's enough space for the buffer to maintain, to basically to protect the view, to hide it. And I would really like to know whether or not there are going to be any structural changes as a result of either the building commissioner or the setback requirements from the DCR land. And I don't know if you want to call for a vote, then you're certainly entitled to do it. But I'd like to get DEP.
I'll be honest with you. I'm curious to see what DEP has to say myself. So I think I don't think. I talked to the client, and I think we can certainly continue it until we've got the response from DEP. If they have concerns with it, then certainly we would react to that. So.
I don't know how anybody else feels, and I don't mean to defer it because usually we say we want to do it our way, but I'd really like their input.
I agree.
And you're talking about side to side, essentially east to west, the width part of it is what you're concerned.
Correct.
I guess my question is, do we also have concerns regarding intertidal zone? Because it looks to me like it's going into intertidal zone, and is that a whole other issue?
We're outside the tidal zone.
You're out. You are firmly outside of the intertidal zone.
Absolutely.
Above
above floodplain as well.
Okay, that was a question line.
The top of the pier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, because from that picture, it looks like that's not the
It's
case.
deceiving.
And that was the question.
It is. The
that I
problem
just want
is
to clarify.
the
You're
blue.
going this way, and I'm thinking this way.
Yeah. One's the property line, one's the pier line.
Yeah, the blue's really, it's a lot of mud.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, because you look at this picture, and I know you said that this may be inaccurate, and I accept that, but viscerally, you look at it and you say, oh, that's land, and it's not water. And then you look at that and it's colored blue and it looks like water. That was.
Well, the
that's what-
mean annual high water level is 9.11, and that line is where this heavy dark blue line.
That's mean high.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So what's represented here is the high tide,
Okay, I
Okay.
get it.
the high
now.
tide condition. And you can see the jetty sticks out, and that line follows the jetty, because at high tide, comes right up. Now, at low tide,
What's the dotted line? Right, yeah, this one here. edge of water, 12913 at 10 a.m.
I'll get rid of it.
I don't know what that means.
It's just what they surveyed at that particular time.
We don't know if it's high or low. Or...
Right, an observed condition, right, so that's an in-between, that's, whether it's an ebb or flood tide, you can't even tell that. I think we might have low tide for reference for
Yeah.
a certain day.
Yeah, we do.
You
We
know,
have
It's
that
quite a
as well.
tide,
This is
I
all
know
flat-
that.
This is all
Right,
flat.
there
But
is.
but at high
And
tide,
that's the question.
you know, essentially, the high tide line is essentially they're right at the property line, and then it follows the jetty out.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, well, I don't want to prolong it. If it's acceptable to you, I'd be much more comfortable if I had DEP's comments. Is that acceptable to continue?
That's acceptable, and we believe that this is a proper exercise of the homeowner's right to access the water, the deck that's owned by the, and it was done in a manner which has minimum interruption or effect upon the coastal bank, and I think it's a reasonable application to.
All right. Any objections from commissioners to continuing this until August? And I don't know if there's, I don't even know who our contact is. Rachel Freed is no longer there?
No, Rachel's,
Is she still there?
no, she's the director now.
Yeah.
Okay.
She would be a really good contact, right?
Well, you know,
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering if we can expedite some kind of a comment from them, so that we can,
I'll
address
certainly-
this in August.
I'll certainly rattle
Do you want to comment?
rattle the
both
cage a little bit.
in DCR?
Yes.
Yes, both.
Yeah. That'll be helpful. All right, so if there are no other comments, questions, suggestions, objections,
The public?
I did ask.
Oh, yeah.
I did ask the public for comments or questions or suggestions, or criticisms, whatever.
Whatever.
So we'll continue this until August. What's the date in August?
The 9th.
The 9th? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your
Excellent.
time
Thank
and
you.
effort.
It's always fun.
Right. Time?
Yeah, me too.
Okay. We have to take a brief recess, so we're out of quorum.
Pause this or not?
Kathy, which ones do I have to sign? Because I'm gonna take off.
The first one, the skating rink. There was, this is the first one there.
Uncle?
Request for determination,
Yeah, the negative.
Sorry for the mess.
that's how they print, you want the one.
Can I lose it? Here's the unit, okay.
And it's annual report time again.
What's it? Oh, okay.
Are you gonna take the samples?
I can hold it, and I promise.
Annual report?
We'll do September. We're always late.
I just did one.
I know in February, but no, I think they upped it. I think it used to be November.
So it's
We just did it in
That's what I
February.
said, I thought the
6
same
months,
thing.
right?
Just did it. And I just thought you might want to mention that we're in a drought. Did you see that anything from that?
Yes, yes, I did.
Just in a public forum, you might just want to mention it. I think that's why Paul Sullivan wants to bring his wetland specialist in. He says, see, it's not a brook. It's been dry for 4 days.
All right. You are probably right on the money.
By the way, it's a drought.
It's a drought. It's a drought, so they can't say that.
But it's for central and northeast Massachusetts? We're northeast,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Because central and northeast there are different terms of art, and it's not drought, it's near drought or close to drought or drought
Drought-like.
watch or something. Yeah, they have a different nomenclature for sort of categorizing the droughts. And I printed them out, and I may actually have brought them.
And I also have the things for Governor Stoughton,
Okay.
in case you need it. And do you want the old material from Governor Stoughton, like Steve Ivers's report?
Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Michael, you're gonna posing for Vineyard Vines?
What?
Are you posing for Vineyard Vines?
What's Vineyard Vines?
A clothing company?
No.
You look sharp.
What Thank you very much.
I love this shots.
Can I give you guys like 2 comments on your own, the files that happened?
I'm sorry?
Can I just give you?
Sure.
So on the addition project that you
Yes.
did?
Yes.
Um,
At 251
Yep.
Canton Avenue?
So the existing patio is considered degraded riverfront? And it's degraded riverfront because it's not vegetated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all you need to do for the stormwater stuff that you're talking about was have them improve existing conditions. So he doesn't need to do the calculations, but he needs to, like what you were suggesting with the sumps and the wells, as long as he makes it better than it is.
Then it is, yeah.
That's his only obligation for the riverfront regs. He just has to make
Yeah,
it
you're
bigger.
right, but the patio is not changing. They're going to build a new patio. So that's currently pervious. So now they're going to make it impervious. This is outside the
Yeah,
addition.
right, so just their obligation is just make it better for a single family.
Make it
home,
better.
Better than it is.
Right.
So whatever that takes.
Yeah.
And your last thing, I just want to say that there's no regulation in the riverfront regs for recreation. Doesn't exist. There's no standard.
We've got recreation and aesthetics in our bylaw.
But
Yeah.
not in the Wetlands Protection Act, like they were
Yeah,
saying.
but there's in the preamble to the Wetlands Protection Act, there's a statement about, what's the word? Because we get into this with 131 Elliott Street, and there's a big term in there that's pretty broad in scope, and it's open space. I think that it's in the preamble, and open space is pretty broad.
But there's no standard or interest for recreational use, so it's not like a.
Right, no,
It's not a given use. And then the whole thing that you're talking about with the switchbacks,
Yeah.
they have the 5,000 square foot or 10% of the riverfront
Allowable.
allowable.
Right.
That exceeds with the switchback. So the whole idea of the alternatives analysis doesn't work, because
Oh, right.
it's not permitted.
It's like a,
Because it exceeds the allowable.
It exceeds the allowable.
So
Yeah,
they would
those
need
are
to come
good
up with a
points.
strategy that was within the allowable to be viable.
And you're allowed to look at off-site alternatives. So like when you're talking about
The path.
off-site access,
Yep.
that's allowed under the riverfront alternatives analysis. You're allowed to look beyond your property.
Right. Thank you.
here it is.
No, that's good.
I found it. You probably know this too, the drought. What are the nomenclature for the drought? It's a drought, the drought
Advisory.
watch.
Thank you.
No, we're in advisory at Southeast right now.
No, this
Quite a
is what I
while.
just printed out.
Oh, is this just recent?
Two things.
Yeah, July 8th.
That the patio in the house that we're talking about is,
Drought watch, drought advisory issued for portions of Mass.
right, it's disturbed riverfront.
We're back
Meaning
in,
that it's not
back in quorum.
vegetated. And therefore, you just have to
We're
make, you have to
southeast
show
of
that
the-
it's
We're
improved.
northeast.
You don't have to,
We-
you don't have to hit a
we-
standard beyond that.
Oh,
And
this
then the
is
comment
considered
about
southeast.
Forbes was that it,
So we,
there's no standard
That's
for
Right in
Boston,
here,
recreation.
we're
the
northeast.
darker
There's no
We're
requirement
warning.
to
Yeah, we're
provide
in a warning.
access to recreation.
We're right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're in a warning right now.
That's-
Huh, not quite an emergency, but kind
That
of
would make
like that.
sense.
In the-
Okay.
There's no requirement for
Did you
that
see
in the,
that, Tom?
in the bylaw.
It's not the emergency with the next one down, but a
Right, but it-
warning.
Right.
Landowner does
Stronger
not
than
have to
this.
do that.
Doesn't have,
So we're not southeast.
no.
Are we
No,
back in
it was,
session?
are we? Oh, sorry.
How's that to go? All right, thanks for your patience again.
There we go.
That concludes additional business. The only one left is number 5, notice of intent, 175 Governor Stoughton Lane. I have previously recused myself from participation in this, because my business does, my law firm does business with Pulte Home, so I shall absent myself from the area. Before I go, you have to tell me what to sign. Yulin?
That's it.
Just Yulin.
So
And
we're
what
good.
about 251 Canton Avenue? Is that one, we continue then?
August until the revised plan. Show the driveway and the patio.
Yeah. Where did I sign this? Determination.
Which I agree with.
What?
I did not like this submission.
For which one?
251 Canton Avenue.
For what?
251 Canton. Didn't didn't have enough info.
Yeah. It wasn't complete.
Kathy, I left everything on top here, okay?
These are yours?
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, can I see that whole package? I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can actually
Thanks.
address it, but I
Okay.
didn't want to speak out of turn.
Sure.
These mics all on?
Every single one.
Thanks all, appreciate your patience and getting me out of here. And we have no sidewalk scheduled, correct?
Correct.
All right, thanks all. Good night.
Good night, John.
Good night.
John?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you introduce yourself, just for the public record?
Of course. So my name is Mark Mastriani. I'm here on behalf of Pulte Homes, who's the applicant of the proposal before the commission. With me tonight is Mike Rosati, to my left in the yellow. He is our engineer, civil engineer, who's put together the design plans and the stormwater. And also with me tonight is Mickey Marcus from New England Environmental. And Mickey Marcus and his firm is our wetland scientists, experts who have filed the notice of intent for a proposed project with the commission. So we're here to talk about the town farm, the 175 Governor Stoughton Lane. My company has an agreement to build a 23-lot, single-family cluster subdivision on 30 acres of the 34-acre parcel at the end of Governor Stoughton Lane. The current owner of the property is the town of Milton, acting by the Board of Selectmen, acting in the capacity of trustees under the will of William Stoughton. We have been before this commission recently in the last number of months or a year for a number of items. The first was an ORAD back about a year ago. We had submitted an ANRAD with Mickey's firm, and the commission issued an ORAD that approved the resource area project. And most recently, as we were working on our notice of intent and our planning board filing, we came before the commission and received approval to do some stormwater testing that we needed to do in accordance with the bylaw in order to finalize our stormwater design that's before you. So just, I'll give another brief overview, and then I'd like to turn it over to Mickey to walk through our notice of intent filing that's before the commission. How best to orientate the board?
What, is there a tripod or something?
There is,
Yeah.
I know, because there's a TV there. So.
I'll get a preference.
Yeah, why don't you do that while I just hold it? I just wanted to make sure everybody knows the piece that you're speaking of. Again, so this outline, so the outline that's colored is a 30-acre portion of the town farm that's located at the end of Governor Stoughton Lane. So Canton Ave is up here, and Governor Stoughton Lane comes down to the old poor farm here, and the old historic buildings are here. So the town of Milton and the trustees are retaining a 4-acre piece of the 34-acre portion of the land, and that's the portion that they're retaining. And our proposal of the cluster subdivision is on the remaining 30-acre portion of the site. Access for the project is proposed off of Unquity Road over here to the west. So that's the sole access.
That's the only access you're proposing.
It's
So
the sole
not over Governor Stoughton
vehicular
Lane.
access. There is a proposed emergency access drive that would be gated, that would leave the proposed cul-de-sac and go out and tie into the old farm driveway, which then goes down to Unquity Road, or goes down to Governor Stoughton Lane, but that is gated and emergency access only. So So that's the orientation, and then, so I'd like to turn it over to Mickey to walk through our notice of intent filing.
You know, so I know, you know, it's late. I'm gonna
No,
give
no.
you.
It's not that late for us, no. Midnight, so
This
10
is-
minutes to 10, early.
We're doing fine.
The first thing is, Kathy,
Nothing's
can I
down.
give you yeah, the mailing? And do you also require the notice of the?
No, I do
paper?
not. I
Okay, okay, so.
Thank you.
Went in the paper as well. We didn't get a DEP file number yet. I don't know if you've gotten it, but I don't think they've issued it yet. They're,
Still under review, but I do
Yep.
need to get a number.
yeah, so we're gonna continue this, right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, just, I don't know if Mark mentioned, but, so this is under review by the planning board. Planning board has hired, engineer to review the project, review stormwater. So, after this presentation, we'll ask for continuance to your next meeting, but if we don't get the stormwater, the engineering reviews from the planning board, we'll probably just ask
Right.
you to continue it till we have all the information and we
Good.
know what the issues are, if that's all right with you. So 23 lots. The time does fly because the wetland delineation was approved by the commission 2 years ago, so it was July 2014. And so,
Really?
yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Wasn't that a winter walk?
It was.
No, we,
We've-
and
Yeah,
plus
I remember
some,
that.
we did both. We've
yeah,
done,
so
yeah.
2014. And so in that intervening time, so we figured out where the wetlands were, you had your peer reviewers, we changed everything, and then based on that, we used it to plan. And
Right.
so Mike and Marcianda did this, they've basically been doing site planning, testing, due diligence over the last 2 years. And so that's why we're finally able to
Sure.
file the NOI. So 6 of the 23 lots are within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Sure.
And I'll go through, I mean, basically, Mike did a very good job of, I guess I'll just use this one. Of basically avoiding wetlands, avoiding buffers. So we have, I don't know if you can see this. Uncanny Road here, here's the site, cul-de-sac, so the only entrance. So the wetlands are laid out in blue. There's isolated wetlands, BVW. So there's a part of the open space part, it says there's a 100-foot.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yep.
Sorry.
Part of the neighborhood
Sorry, can I
zone.
interrupt for just, was there an issue about vernal pools on this?
There,
I thought
yes.
I thought there was.
Yeah, we
Okay.
looked at it, established,
That it was within the center of the wetland and the effective boundary
I
was.
just seem to remember that, and I just can't recall what the determination
Steve
was
Ivins
there.
had done that. That was
Duplicative.
part of the plan, that there's potential vernal pools off the property.
Right.
So
and
the
that-
blue lines are the wetland lines, and within some of these wetlands, there are in fact vernal pools. There are
Correct.
2, I
Potential
think.
vernal-
I
don't
think.
think they were certified. I think we found
Oh, I thought one.
some wood frog egg masses,
Yeah.
and you just want all work to stay away from those areas.
My recollection was that the buffer zone was outside of the buffer zone of the wetland itself. That's my
Yeah,
recollection.
and
I mean, was within the, well, I'm sorry, was not outside, was within the wetland itself.
it was.
Right.
Right, so they, next time I come, I'll bring that area plan, just so you can
Just
see that.
to refresh our
Basically,
memory, yeah.
the vernal pools were, or potential vernal pools were within the wetlands. They had a buffer zone associated with them, and they were in this area, but.
And you're pretty sure none was certified? I thought at least one, no,
No.
none were,
No, we
okay,
all- I think there was one that could be that was certifiable,
okay.
Right.
but they're all like potential vernal pools.
And there were. Do you want to actually finish going through your,
Yeah,
and we'll try?
So I'm just going to give you an overview.
Sure.
So basically, the way, I'll have Mike, go through the engineering, the stormwater, which is, kind of a big part of this. But laid out the lots, try to keep everything away from the wetlands. And what I want to point out are, I guess I'll call it the pinch points.
Yep.
So there's a little area here, here,
here, and here,
Right.
where there's work within 25 feet of wetlands.
Right.
So basically, there's a sidewalk right here, a little bit of grading here, and then this is grading associated with a detention basin in this corner.
Okay.
Then the only wetland impact for the project is right here.
Right.
So there's an area that we walked with the ANRAD due diligence, but there's a water and sewer line that needs to come this way and is proposed to cross the wetlands.
It doesn't cut out into the resident, because I saw that it lined up with a paper road across it through the residential zone. You weren't cutting in to connect to that, you were just cutting over to get to the other side of the wetland?
Yes, so the sewer mains
Yep.
comes down in this
Right,
area here, and
exactly.
it takes a left.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
we're
Okay, so
able
that's
to
an
tie in-
existing main that's already going down that left,
And
okay.
it's- And you can see the fill that they use to cover the sewers up. And so we're tying into that main here.
Right.
And the water main also comes down here, and that actually, we believe there's a gate and a stub
Oh, sure.
for the continuance. So that's kind of how we lined this up, and we also looked for the most least impact
Right.
of that ditch that we have to cross.
So there's 978 square feet
Of impact,
there. And
right.
so what the rules are is that you, 1053 3D, but basically you can put in sewer line through the wetlands as long as you restore the land surface at the same elevation. You have to revegetate it. So what we ended up doing in the notice of intent is, we did another data form right at this area. So you've got a record of what the wetlands look like and what the uplands buffer looks like.
Sure.
Existing conditions, and document what the vegetation is in those areas. So that's a wetland impact. And, there's a lot of review, with you folks, planning board, but the overview is what we just try to do is avoid.
What's the pink, Mickey?
I'm sorry, these pink areas are the stormwater basins. And
Those are the basins,
Those are the basins.
okay.
And so I'll let Mike go through that because they interviewed it. And so, the goal in laying this out was to have a lot of vegetation between this project and the neighborhood, avoid the wetlands. So it's a lot of lots, but we've really tried to respect all the wetlands, the buffers, all the things that you've previously established.
And those stormwater basins were the subject of our last site walk.
They were. So
Right,
yeah,
that was
so-
the reason for the.
Exactly,
The
yeah.
snow.
So when you did the last site walk, that was to do soil testing
Mhm.
and to
Yeah.
make sure, and
Right.
based on that testing, then the basin locations got
Correct.
finalized.
Okay, so before we get into the engineering side of it,
Yeah.
from our perspective, reducing the number of impacts and looking at the plan and understanding that we're looking at the 3 plus the 1 at the entrance, can you explain why you can't modify the layout to avoid those minimal impacts that you have?
Yeah.
And part of the discussion I want to revolve around the impact of installing a road is greater than the road itself. So even though you're indicating a small impact, the expected impact due to excavation and road work and actual construction is going to be larger. And that's why, if we can you explain why we can't modify the path to remove those areas that you have as red? And I'd like to talk about the connection to Unquity as a separate piece,
Okay.
but just specifically in the road layout.
Yeah, so right now, there's no retaining walls.
Sure.
So it's possible to some degree, there's a sidewalk here that the planning board requires, so that's the additional width in this little area in here. So this is an isolated wetland.
No, I'm just saying, I look at that and I say, well, why can't we modify the curves or the path of the road to shift it so that those were basically outside of those areas that are areas of impact?
You're saying basically, like, can you shift the
Yeah,
road?
exactly.
Yeah,
And
so-
straighten out the other one so that
I
it's.
can answer that question,
Yeah,
I
sure.
think. So this is, as you want to call it, a pinch point in this direction here.
Yep.
We actually set this road at a minimum setback to having a house that is 100 feet off the property boundary, of minimal width, I think it's 32 feet, and then the setback to the street. And that ended up encroaching a little bit. And when I was, this has
Okay.
been the first time I've been in front of this commission, so
Yep.
I wasn't sure how important that was to you.
0 makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, so I'm getting that now. There's things that I can ask the engineer, town
Sure.
engineer, that we could consider, and one is to get rid of the green space between the sidewalk and the road, the edge of pavement.
The 100-foot buffer, that's a planning board issue, or is that an agreement that you came with them in the project proposal?
It's an agreement that my company made to the trustees as part of our response to the request for proposal.
Do you feel
It's
that,
a private agreement between the selectmen and.
It's a neighborhood setback, so that the houses
Yep.
would be at least 100 feet away from the property.
Why
line.
can't you make that house on that one lot smaller?
yeah, or even, or ask to modify the negotiation at that
Yeah.
point,
So-
Yeah.
from our perspective?
So this house, if you notice, it's a different shape. It's a long, skinny
Yep.
house, so it's sort of like shifted for that
Right.
reason.
I
So-
did see the note that said that these are graphic and the ultimate plans are gonna be, may be different. But do you feel that they're open, understanding that that's the thing that's pushing the road in that direction, do you feel that the trustees may be open to discussing a specific location that you can encroach on that 100 feet based on other concerns? Do you feel like that's a drawn in the sand kind of line that is unwavering, or?
Yeah, so there's definitely a line drawn in the sand that there's a requirement and a commitment that my company made to provide a 100-foot neighborhood buffer. And that cannot be changed. The agreement's been through the Attorney General.
No, I'm
went
just,
through probate
sure.
court and stuff, so in order to change that would, we just couldn't do that. It would
Right.
change the terms of the deal and the
Sure.
commitments that my company made. The definition of the 100-foot buffer certainly has been a subject to interpretation for a long time, and we're hoping to resolve that with the planning board in our upcoming meetings.
Their interpretation of the 100-foot buffer is undisturbed fully in its natural current state versus backyard. Is that kind of the grounds of that discussion that's ongoing?
That's one end of the spectrum.
Right.
Versus
The other
that-
end,
that
yeah.
we've kind of backed off from our perspective
Sure.
of what that was, by giving the 100-foot from the boundary of our site now, instead of from the backyards of the abutters.
Sure.
So we're in like a middle ground, we think?
Right.
Am I taking this right, saying this right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, really unfortunately, for all parties involved, the definition is ambiguous.
Right.
And there's competing interests and parties who have different interpretations of what it meant.
Right.
And it really is
Complicates it,
unfortunate,
yeah.
because when things are properly defined, there's no arguments and there's no questions, and the topic was never discussed.
Right.
There was no definition, and there's different interpretations floating around. So what we've tried to do is, honor our commitment and provide a 100-foot neighborhood buffer on the plans that we submitted to the commission and to the planning board, which is respectful of the neighbors and complies with our agreement and
Right.
our commitment, and is also respectful of the environment and the
Okay.
wetlands. So it's a balancing act, and we're prepared to do our best, give our best effort to try to work with all different parties to
Sure.
create a plan that is respectful of the neighbors and of the wetlands and the commission, and meets all the guidelines that are set forth by the planning board. So
Okay.
we're at the beginning stages of that, but I think the plan we've submitted is a real good step in the right direction.
Okay. So, but in terms of, thank you, in terms of the encroachment, if that takes it to a whole another level of discussion, and if you could
Would
figure out a
that-
way to remove those, it simplifies the discussion significantly.
So in my discussions with the DPW and the consultant that's gonna review this, I'm gonna ask for some I'm gonna ask some questions
Yes.
as to maybe what we can do to improve on that.
Right.
And see if I can't get that to happen.
Okay.
Through the course of everybody asking for things, we can.
Sure.
I think we can work out something
So-
that would be
so-
satisfactory to you.
So what I heard is reduced buffer impacts 0 is best.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the
So-
target.
For the
And-
25-foot buffer, is that what?
Correct, that's what we're talking about, the 25-foot buffer, yeah. And then, talking about the connection to Unquity, the reason for the impact at that location, there seems to me to be a significant amount of variation in where you can make that connection in terms of because of the significant grading that you're gonna have to do. Why can't that be modified so that is a non-issue as well?
So when we first got involved in the
Yep.
project, we recognized that this was gonna be a sensitive issue.
Sure.
So our traffic consultant, we brought him out, and knowing that this is a very busy road.
Sure.
And this plan doesn't do it justice, but I think we have one that shows the curves, the sight distance coming in and coming in this way are something to be concerned about. So we asked Bob Michaud, who's the traffic consultant, where this road needed to go to satisfy all the people that are gonna have to review this relative to this curb cut. And this is the optimum area for that.
Okay, and how much, understanding that safety is a huge issue, and how much leeway is in that discussion with them? I mean, is it like,
We would have
this
to
is
ask
it,
Bob.
this is it, and moving it further away it deteriorates that and makes it a worse condition?
That's the conversation I've had with Bob.
Yep.
I guess we need to have more input from maybe the DCR
Okay.
relative to that, and we're certainly willing to do that.
Yep.
To see if we could compromise a little bit on that sight distance,
Yep.
on that direction, to try and make this a little better for you.
Okay, in terms of the scheme of things, that's a small, for me personally, that's a smaller issue than the discussions of the encroachment on the 25 feet. Given the character of the existing condition that's there, the use of Unquity and the kind of road that it is, this is much more significant of an issue than that.
So I did
for me.
want to explain in detail what's
Yep.
going on there, in case you don't know.
Yeah, I would like, yep.
We have the roadway here, we have created a small basin in this area here to treat the runoff before we discharge it to the wetland that's here.
Yep.
And this area in red is actually the embankment of that basin that's being proposed here. So this is basically a filled berm, is what it is, that you're seeing in the 25-foot.
So you're not actually impacting the current wetland itself, it's really just that 25-foot buffer zone, and it's for the flow-in area, or whatever you want.
Stormwater.
The stormwater of the edge of the,
Dissipation of it.
yeah, dissipation of the stormwater.
So we are altering right up to the edge of wetland with that work.
Okay,
So as not to create erosion.
right.
And to improve the stormwater
Right.
quality of the water
Correct.
coming off the roadway.
Okay.
So since I'm up here, I'm
Sure,
just
sure,
gonna
yeah,
continue. So in this plan here, it's not really, it's not well defined here, but this red line that you see, or all along the edge here, that is the proposed limit of work. We've actually looked at these lots, and we've actually graded the lots as if we were gonna build these houses.
Sure.
So we think it's a very real limit of work, so
Okay.
that you can assess that. And as Mickey pointed out, in this area here, we are respecting all the buffers, even with this basin here that we have. In dealing with the stormwater, we have done an analysis of the existing flows off the site, and I've got this rather complex drawing here for you to look at.
Right.
So there's a set of 9 standards that could apply to development when we talk stormwater, and that DEP sets for us, and we've met all those standards, all the applicable standards. We are not dealing with a reconstruction or anything like that, so we don't have to meet any of those standards. They don't apply, I should say. So one of the main standards, the number 2 standard, or the number 1 standard would be no direct discharge to the wetland.
Right.
So in this design that we've showed you, we do not have that. Every point where stormwater leaves the site, it's being treated before it goes off.
And that's all of your basins?
That's part of the answer.
Yep.
And then the second criteria, or the second standard, is that we are not to have any increase in runoff from the site, from pre-development levels.
Sure.
And we've accomplished that, we believe, in the stormwater report that I've provided for your consultants and yourself. But as an overview, we have water that leaves the site in 2 directions mainly. One down to Unquity Road, and one down to a wetland that exists in the back of the project right here, which happens to be a small pond, if you will, up gradient of the gentleman's driveway that lives next door. So in our analysis, we've broken the watershed in this direction and in that direction into sub-design points where water leaves the site. We've defined that.
Okay.
That's these study points you see here. We have 6 of them on this job, basically. And the idea is to establish what the runoff is before we proposed our site, and those numbers are what we are trying to attain in the post-development conditions. So we develop the numbers in the pre-development, and then when we do our post-development, we try to meet or decrease the flow off the site from those points.
So, in the write-up, what I had read was that you have achieved meeting those.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, in any cases, have you actually exceeded that reduction? And if so, what did you achieve?
So,
because optimally, from our perspective, we want to see an improvement, and not a negligible improvement, but a quantifiable, kind of justifiable improvement.
Yeah. So, because of the soils that we're involved with here,
Sure.
and the fact that it's not very large watersheds,
Right.
We don't have a lot of water to deal with to begin with.
Oh, good. Okay.
So when we talk about improvement, it's all relative, right?
Right.
So I point that out because in this chart here, this is the resulting chart. In the 100-year storm, we only have like a half a CFS coming out of this design point.
Oh, right.
So it's very tough to get a very good increase
Right.
out of that. So I think that's the situation here. So I think the biggest flow rate we have out of the design point is close to 2 CFS.
Okay.
And we are able to meet that at those points.
Okay, but because the numbers are so small, shouldn't it be relatively easy to make an improvement?
No, not really. I mean, we are making an improvement from the inflow hydrograph. You know, the inflow hydrograph to the basin being, or to the point, the study point being the roadway and the amount of houses, the impervious and that. We've
Right.
reduced that down significantly
Right.
to meet that 1.8. So like if we had no mitigation,
Right.
I could tell you what.
So what you're saying is you're accommodating all of the impervious surface that's being introduced, but you're not, and you're doing that in the basins that you're proposing, but you're not actually improving the situation for these edge conditions because the runoff is so small.
That's right.
Okay.
We're trying to do that, but in most cases, it's a tenth of a CFS or something
Right.
like that from the pre-development level.
What page in the report is that chart from? If you could
This
just,
chart is from page 9. So I wanted to, maybe on the next time I come, I can get you those numbers for, for study point 1, what the impervious was going, what the flow rate into the basin was going to be. So like if it was 10 and I'm knocking it down to 1, you could see
Right.
that I've done something
yeah, that would be,
substantial.
Yep.
So that might help you in that,
Yep.
in that regard.
thank you.
No problem. So to accomplish this goal, we had to incorporate 6 basins in this design. And that's what these pink locations are on the plan. So we have one in this area here because we have a watershed that's running this way. And then a series of smaller ones on the larger watershed. This one taking this portion of the road here.
Yep.
This portion of the road going in here, this lower portion of the road coming in here and here. And then this basin is for the part of the road that flows this way. So we create, in the profile of this roadway, we created a high spot or in the road here,
Sure.
so that we could confine how much water got to this point.
Sure.
Now, these are basins that you're creating?
Mm-hmm.
You're digging these?
Yes, yes,
And
and
how-
sometimes we're filling on the low end, depending on the topography.
How deep are they? Is it there on the map? I don't see it from
Yeah,
this.
so this is something that's in this, and it's on the map, you really have to look for it. So
Okay.
for the most part, these are depressions that we've created that are 3 to 4 feet deep, if you will, from the top of the berm to the very bottom of the pond.
Mhm.
That's not to say it ponds 4 feet of water. We have the design flow in the 100-year storm where we think that's coming to. On top of that, we have a spillway elevation, meaning that if the storm was ever exceeded, the storm water would leave the basin in a controlled manner, and that is slightly higher than the top of the 100-year flow. And then we have the top of berm above that. So there's freeboard, if you will, above that, that's not being used most of the time.
Does anything surround these basements? Do you have any sort of a wall or a fence or anything at all?
Because they are shallow, we don't think we need that, but if
better.
that's something
No,
that
I think that's better. In fact, we don't want something around
So,
there.
like, we have proposed on our plans right now, in the sensitive areas of these basins, to vegetate them, and to screen them if we could, from the abutters. So we have definitely plantings along this edge, and we're okay with planting plants, trees, whatever, on the downside of the slope. We may even be okay with planting on the bench, on the top.
Yep.
Obviously, you want to have access to these basins for any type of maintenance
Yeah.
that you might have. So, for example, this basin right here, we have access here, 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 and here throughout this whole basin, and we can get into the bottom of the basin from these sides. So there'd be no reason to limit the landscaping along the top of this berm right here. On this basin here, we can come in this way and this way, so there's no reason we can't landscape that. And we are proposing that because we're sensitive to the butters next door.
Sure.
In this area here, this is a wooded area. We can supplement some trees there if you like. We haven't proposed that because it's in a wooded area and it's not around anyone that might be concerned about screening.
That's
Part of
one
the
area-
excavation, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Part of the excavation associated with that basin, because it's in a wooded area, you're proposing to, correct me if I'm wrong, remove all of the current trees in order to make the excavation, and basically it becomes a clearing within the woods.
That's correct.
Okay.
They were all flagged, remember?
Right.
Yeah, and, we are respecting the 25-foot buffer around here, and I think we did talk about that at the site walk we had for the soil testing that we did
Right.
prior to doing that. We wouldn't have a problem if you felt you wanted to vegetate the
Right.
downside of those basins, whatever, to get some of that shade back or whatever, but.
Sure.
Isn't that the area where we found the showy lady slippers, though? It was
don't
right
recall.
along. It was right along that edge of the property. Do you remember, Mickey? We found
have it
quite a
mapped, but I
few.
don't have it.
You do have it mapped. Okay. I'd be interested in knowing where they were found relative to where that road and the basin certainly is. I mean, they like a wet foot anyway, but we don't want to disturb them. We don't have many left in Milton at all. They used to be so plentiful, and they're not anymore. So that would be one thing I'd be interested in, Mickey, to let us know on that map, and then we could see if
Sure.
maybe we
They're
could
showy,
adjust.
they're Reginae, not a
Yes,
Kool-Aid?
no, they're showy lady slippers. We found them.
Interesting.
One of the few, yeah.
Yeah, they're not very many at all. We've got a Kool-Aid, but I'm not ever seen a Reginae.
That's it, there.
So you mentioned to me whether they were excavated or filled. It's a combination of both depending on where we are, but I will say that some of these basins are designed to infiltrate water.
Right.
So to meet standard number 3, we have taken ground cover that was treed and we've now put impervious on it, which causes water that would have normally got into the ground to run off.
Right.
And to mitigate for that, we have to meet standard 3, which says basically you need to put a certain amount of the water that you have underneath the impervious into the ground. And so for the A soil, this turns out to be something like 10,000 cubic feet of volume. So we're doing that in this basin here, and in this basin here. These are all infiltration basins.
Okay.
These are not. So what does that mean? So for an infiltration basin, we need to have a greater separation to the groundwater than we would with the other basins, simply because we want to have a separation to the high water table so that water can percolate down.
Sure.
So those basins that are infiltration basins are going to be more in a filled situation than a cut situation. So I just wanted to point that out.
Do any of the basins that are adjacent to the wetland now, they all have to respect the water table as it is now? And does that come into your calculations in terms of the infiltration?
Mm-hmm.
And so these are, basically these basins are all set high.
So in this, I'm sure you're more concerned about the
Well,
wetland.
I'm looking at, there's 4 of them that are kind of adjacent to wetlands, but.
So this one here, this was the situation where we had wetland all around us.
Right.
And it
The
kind
mound.
of went up, mounded
Yeah.
up in the middle. So the groundwater, I believe in that area, if I remember correctly, is something like 6 or 7 feet below the very top of the mound.
Sure.
So with a 4-foot separation, that only allowed us to sink this into the ground 3 feet.
From the top.
From the top.
So
So on
basically-
the edges, it's filled. So that's why when she asked me, are we excavating these ponds? Yes, and sometimes no. So on the very top, yeah, we're in the ground a little bit, but for the most part, we're filling on the edges and then meeting grade at the 25-foot buffer.
And even with that, you're able to gravity feed off the road into it.
Yes.
So is the road fill? I mean, the road must be,
Well, the road in elevation is much higher. If you recall, when we were going down into that area, when we mapped the
Yeah.
way for the backhoe, we actually had to go down a slope.
I don't recall that, but okay.
That was right
Yep.
along
Yeah.
the center line,
Yep.
right in
Yep.
here, right down in here,
so it's all still gravity.
Yes, it's all gravity flow. So these basins are kind of proposed where they are, so
Right.
that we could get gravity off the road through that, from the roadway to them. Again, with this basin here, this one is on the downslope of the field that's up by the animal kennel, excuse me. I think the water table here was more like 8 or 9 feet, but with that topography that we have, if we cut it in on the high side, it's still on a fill on the low side. So that's this fill berm that you see right here.
Okay. So another question, some of the basins you said were also filtration basins, and are the filtration basins also being planted in a specific way, or you haven't gotten to that point at this, haven't gotten there yet? Or that's where you're intending to go, or?
We're grassing them. We're grassing the bottoms, they'll be mowed, because we really don't want trees to grow in the basins.
Yeah, but there are other
themselves.
plants that help with filtration more
So
than.
Mickey and I had talked about that before the meeting as to whether we could plant something else that, instead of
That
grass.
improves.
So basically, what ends up at the bottom of those basins is a moist wetland, it's a wetland seed mix, but it also has a drier component, so it's not like grass, it's more a diverse
Broad-based, kind of.
herbaceous mix, but it does get mown once a year, because
Yep.
you don't want trees in it. But there's opportunities to add additional vegetation. It's basically wildlife habitat next to these things,
Sure.
adjacent to the basin. So where there are slopes, there's an opportunity to revegetate them, as long as there's at least one access point for each basin for any future maintenance.
But my question is about whether or not there's, because we're talking about runoff from the road, is there a planting mix or a planting that you can basically introduce into those basins that is going to improve the filtration and the breakdown of anything that's coming off the roads to minimize, because we're using these as staging zones to the wetlands. And is there anything that we can do along, because we've actually, at the pond, at the playing fields by
Houghton's Pond.
Right.
there was a whole sequence of, on the downhill side from that we had them come in and do a staged planting that cycled in and improved the runoff.
Yep, absolutely. So, the way these designs are working is that, so the roads have the catch basins, sumps, they're pre-treated, they go into these basins, they sit in these basins, and the idea is that, the water's gonna infiltrate, you've got the vegetation there.
Sure.
The nutrient loading uptake that you're talking about is usually going on in any kind of contact and vegetation.
Sure.
So it's, the typical seed mix is a moist mix. It's like I say, a combination of wetland grasses and non-wetland grasses.
Okay.
And that seems to work. So the infiltration basin, the idea is you don't have the overflow, you're just having the recharge back into the groundwater in those areas. So that's sort of like the best practice, if it works. And those, I think there are 3 basins that do that.
Right.
It works if you have the right soils, and in those locations, the soils are appropriate.
So actually, could you comment a little bit about the excavations that you did in evaluating what you found in each of those locations, and whether or not you, like specifically in that one, I'm not sure if you have numbered number 3, did you find something that's going to require you to use heavy excavation? My concern was that this is a very rocky area. That was a high point. Are you talking about the whole ram or every other heavy equipment that's going to require vibration? We have a concern about that causing an impact to the adjacent wetlands. And if it's all light, soil and it's the heavy equipment but light moving, that's a preferable situation for our perspective.
So I think I even mentioned to you when we were out on the sidewalk that when we looked at the mound and we saw some of the surface boulders, that it was going to be tough to get down into the soil with the excavator. And I have to say I was pleasantly surprised as to how easy that machine got through that material. There were boulders, they're maybe 3 to 4 foot in diameter.
Yep.
But he was able to get down, I don't have the logs exactly with me, but I can get them for you.
Sure.
A considerable distance. Like I said, the modeling in the soil that we found, I think, was at 6 or 7 feet. We were a good 4 feet or so below that, and I was at the very top of the hill.
Yep.
So I was very surprised that we were able to do that rather easily. So I think for me to say to you that we're not going to need heavy equipment to move some of those boulders.
Well, I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the use of a whole ram or heavy vibration.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, if there's something there that has to be whole rammed, like if we find something that, typically what they do is they take 3 or 4 foot boulders, they put them in the rock truck, and they bring them up to a stockpile area.
Right.
And at some point, they either whole ram them or crush them, one or the other.
Sure.
At that location, they make the riprap from that, or they haul them off site from there. So that I don't think there'd really be any reason to whole ram in the actual basins themselves.
Sure.
If we had to move a rock, like we couldn't move with the machine, I think they'd drill and blast that at that point instead
So
of.
we have significant concerns about any proposal to do blasting.
So I'd say we'd have to look at that for you in more detail.
As it develops.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
So there was, in this area here, in this area next to this basin here, this is the one with the very large stones that I was
Oh, that's
trying
right.
to
Avoid.
incorporate that in my design. I'm here to say that, I'm sorry to say I can't do that. So those rocks will have to be drilled and probably broken up in place because they're just too big to move.
You couldn't work around them.
No, they're not at the right elevation. They're just not conforming to what we need.
In terms of the soil that's between them, you couldn't excavate to introduce a basin between the existing rocks, boulders, by berming the backside or something like that.
No, I tried to incorporate that. The problem with those boulders are they're sitting right on the ground.
Right.
They're not even embedded in the ground. One of them is right along the edge of the road here, where the sidewalk is going. So I don't think that's going to work. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So. Relative to the blasting, I don't think there's going to have to be a lot in the areas of where these basins are, but there may be some.
We have a concern about blasting.
Okay.
Okay.
Preference whole rim versus blasting?
Well, neither, preferably.
Yeah.
But especially adjacent to the wetlands. I mean, if you're talking about something that's out on the other end, then
Yeah, I mean, I
vibration
think
isn't an issue.
up in here you might have blasting
Right.
going on, but that's at the top of the hill.
Right, and that's
Yeah. So.
The other thing I could just add, one of the plan sheets also has the construction staging area, so there are some
yeah.
temporary basins that are developed as the project progresses, and the idea is just to have sediment erosion control internally during construction, so that's all been phased out, so it's not like the whole project is being, as the project is progressing, there's a way to accommodate stormwater on the site.
So are any, I remember seeing those plans, I don't remember are any of those temporary basins within the 100-foot buffer? It's all outside the 100-foot buffer and.
It's like where houses would go.
Right,
you know.
okay.
Well, since we're talking about that,
Sure.
I asked the question, if that concerns you, that maybe I might have to put a little bit more thought into that, because typically, when we're doing our construction, there may be natural areas that are on the site that we might like to take advantage of, that
Right.
would, I'm not talking about anything major, but, if we found a depression that was, say, 50 foot in diameter.
Right.
And we're working in that area,
Right.
there's no sense to filling it in. We might leave it as a temporary sedimentation basin until we're ready to do the work in that area, just so that we have an extra device to
Right,
help
so
us.
these
with
are
water
areas,
quality.
these are areas that you're going to impact eventually in the plan anyways, and if we find
Yes.
that they're there naturally, I totally agree with you, that you should take advantage of that, and if that helps us minimize an impact even during construction in another area, that's just taking advantage of something that's
So
been
I
given
think I
to
see
us.
what you were saying now, that I do not have to go outside our limit of work. I wouldn't go outside our
Right.
limit of work to do some type of stormwater temporary basin or
No,
something.
I was you actually have proposed work that's within the 100-foot buffer in the ultimate construction. I was asking whether or not all the temporary basins were outside of the 100-foot buffer, just to minimize any potential environmental error or mistake or failure or flow that we weren't expecting. And if we can keep those temporary basins outside of the 100-foot buffer, during the course of construction, the 100-foot buffer gives us more protection from anything that might inadvertently happen during the course of work. And if you can find natural conditions that give us those kinds of levels of protection, fantastic. And we would hope that you would take advantage. I mean, it's to your benefit, but from our perspective, it's to our benefit as well, because they're naturally gonna, they'll probably be more stable and more resistant to problems than something that's man-made. Can you talk now? We talked about the one crossing. You mentioned that you're connecting to both the sewer and the water at that point. Can you explain why we can't run that down the road and connect at Unquity directly without having to do the crossing as an alternatives analysis?
So there is no water and sewer in Unquity Road right here at all.
Okay. But there is water and sewer further along Unquity Road?
This water and sewer runs down here across Unquity Road and through the wetland, I believe, across the street.
Okay.
So I guess what's the alternative? The alternative could be we tie in down here and run the utilities along the edge of the road and along the edge of this wetland here to get to here and then
Okay.
up the road. So I could illustrate that a little bit for you, and
But your concern in that scenario is that we have a wetland that's adjacent to it, and this is a less of an impact, do you suspect, than what we'd be,
That
that
would
you'd be
definitely be the
showing along
case.
there? Can you actually do, if you could do a diagram that shows that, just so that we have
show you
that?
how much
Yeah,
we're
just,
talking about.
so,
and-
I understand why you are where you are, but just give us, if you could give us a diagram that basically documents why that's a bigger impact than what you're proposing on this, that would be good.
Because I would suspect that if we were to do that, and I think I just made that assumption, that would be done on the shoulder of the road, especially since the DCI, I think, just paved it.
Just paved it.
Yeah.
It's really nice now.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah, one season.
So yes, I can do that for
Yeah.
you. And I didn't mention that part of the, not that it matters relative to whether we tap in here or if we
Sure.
tap here, we're extending the water main up through to the end of Governor Stoughton to
Back
complete the loop,
Yep.
if you will. Governor Stoughton right now is dead end, so the DPW would like that. That was part of what they'd like to see with this project. Utilities, the gas and the electric that are coming from Governor Stoughton to this project. We're not coming in off of Unquity Road, so we don't have to do anything
Sure.
down in here for that.
So, in my first reaction in looking at the plans were houses 1, 2, and 23, just in terms of how tight they are and how much they encroach on the 100-foot buffer, or rather how close they. All the other houses, my recollection is, have a minimal impact on the even kind of crowding the 25-foot. Those 4 houses. The 3 houses plus the 23 seem to be the biggest impact or the biggest kind of crowding. And I don't know what you can do to minimize that, or kind of give us the most buffer that you can, and especially because those are places where we're asking you to modify the road to even tighten them up more.
But I will say this.
There's a balancing act there somewhere, yeah.
So I will say this, if you look at the grading for these, especially these two.
Yep.
The backyards are lower than the ground behind us, so the wetland is actually higher
uphill.
than we are.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I still might
Good
be able to
point.
tighten that up.
Yep.
You know, maybe we put a retaining wall up instead
Yep.
of doing a slope and pull the tree line closer to us.
Okay, so on those 3 houses, if you could look at those from that perspective, I'll try to understand it better as well. And then understanding that number 23 and your concern about the 100-foot buffer, the 100-foot backyard or the buffer zone to the property, and then we're trying to get it out of that's going to be the pinch point.
So, yes, right, and then, of course, you know, the buffer zone is here. Actually, 23's house is outside the buffer zone.
I meant the 100-foot that
Yes,
you're
I know,
trying to.
I know what you meant.
Yeah, yeah.
Now they got it, yep. So, yes, we are gonna try to move this way.
Right, yeah. Because it's going to simplify the discussion for us to get rid of the encroachment on the 25. And I think your comment about it being, the wetland being uphill on those other houses that's a great comment, that's a great response.
Okay.
Did any of the other commissioners have questions or comments, or based on where we are? Were there this is pretty much the presentation that you want to make today?
I think so. You know, I think this is, so there's detailed plans, you know, Duke was asking about like the elevations. So the plans have all the details with all the elevations. This is just an overall
Yeah.
plan. Yeah, I think what will happen is, as you look at this, and as, you know, the town's consultants look at this, there'll be other questions, and we'll get into, you know, additional detail. I think what all of you have given us are some items that we need to do some homework on. So we'll do that, and we haven't gotten the DP file number, we haven't gotten DP comments. So what I'd like to do is, you know, ask if you would continue this to your August meeting, but if we don't have those additional comments back from the engineer, we're gonna just wait until we can address all this other concerns.
That makes sense, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And in the meantime, you know, you've given us a kind of a list of things that we need to work on for you, additional plans to provide.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So as far as peer review, will the commission piggyback upon the planning board's peer review
In terms of the engineering analysis?
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
Lisa Eggleston is reviewing it on behalf of the planning board for stormwater and engineering.
Yep.
aspects.
Yeah, we don't need to,
That'd be great.
we'll view that as an acceptable
Yeah,
peer
we don't
review
need
in
to
terms of,
duplicate.
in terms of the engineering side of it, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay. Yes, so in terms of deferring the discussion or till the next meeting or following that, we don't, that's perfectly fine. We don't have an issue. No, this is good. Any other comments, questions? We're good.
Look forward to the next meeting.
Appreciate your time.
That's good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good preparation. Thank you.
Yeah,
very
that's
much.
great preparation.
Thank you. Now you put me on the spot, I've got to find the, no, I have a GPS point.
When is the August meeting, August 9th? Did I hear?
Yes.
I have people
And is there
coming
a
to me
time?
saying, what about those lady slippers? Where are they? Number.
The next one is. 13th. That's Thursday.
That would be September 13th?
Yes.
Would be the one following.
We had only one other additional business. I was asked to look at 11:30, was that it? 10:44? No, Brook Road. I'm totally off then, okay.
You looked at the wrong one.
No, I did. No, I knocked on the door. But they were very nice. They had, in fact, cut down some trees. The brook is in back, you know. New homeowners didn't quite know. Hunt Brothers should have known better, but they're also coming in to do an addition on the back. So I said, well, hold off. They were very receptive. Oh, we weren't supposed to do that, and replacing and all that. So when they come in, they're going to pick up the forms from Kathy. I said, at that point, we can discuss what they need to do to mitigate the trees that they took down and replant.
Yeah.
It should be fine.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Travel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
I also have another one for you.
okay. I knocked on the door. I'm like, I hope there's no big dogs. But there weren't. People are nice. What number is this?
Let's see, it's Chesterfield.
One of these days, I'll meet someone and they'll go,
That's like-
"Who are you? Get off my property," or something.
You know what, I'll forward it to you.
Okay,
I don't
email me.
remember, but I'm pretty sure it's hemlocks in the dying that she wants.
Oh,
That's the
well,
one we
what
did sidewalk
happens?
on.
No,
There's another one.
this is just what's advice and then, she doesn't want to cut anything down without someone coming to tell her what to do.
Where's John? He should be here to close the meeting.
Go ahead.
We can do it. Here.
You're here? Okay.
Motion to
Motion to adjourn.
submit.
David, so good.